order the regular Board of Trustees meeting for November 23rd, 2021. Will you please stand and join me in the Pledge of Allegiance?
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. Deputy Clerk, will you call the roll, please?
Mayor Karspeth?
Here.
Trustee Hyman?
Here.
Trustee Stevens?
Here.
Trustee Grace?
Here.
Mayor Pro Tem Dower?
Here.
Trustee Sarcelli?
Here.
And Trustee Hardy is absent.
Okay, before we continue on, we do have the mask mandate still in effect. If folks, if you don't have a mask on, if you please could, highly appreciate that. And I do believe Deputy Clerk's got some extras too if you need one. Okay, we can move on now to citizen participation. This is for anyone in the audience or online that would like to speak. Oh, sure. Just come on up. I don't know if you've had a chance to sign up. You did? Okay, great. Okay, we got two here. And if you could please come to the front, state your name and address, and if you could please keep your comments to 3 minutes or less. Thank you very much, sir.
My name is John Fallon. I live at 217 East Colorado Avenue. My concern is there's an ordinance within the town that you can't trim the trees in the tree lawn without a permit as a homeowner. It was established in 2019. You can look it up. I was trying to look it up, but I have 3 minutes. At the end of May, beginning of June, shortly after my father's death, my brother trespassed upon my property, trimmed my trees, mowed my lawn without my permission while I was at work. I don't know what I've done to the town of Berthoud or the trustees, but I've called and talked to the sheriff. Shortly after it happened, I've talked to the forestry department, I've talked to the code enforcement. Nobody's willing to back me. This is wrong. I am done.
Okay.
Thank you for your time.
Thank you, sir. I think we don't know much of the backstory on this. Administrator Kirk, do
I
you,
honestly don't know any of the backstory either, so it's something I'd have to look into.
do you mind emailing Administrator Kirk and we can kind of get some of this information out?
I'm happy to touch base with our code enforcement officer. It sounds like you've
I
spoken.
talked to her today.
Spoken to her
I
today.
talked to Josh last week, and the day after my brother came and trimmed my trees and mowed my lawn, trespassed upon my property without my permission while I was at work. In deep grief after my father's death. Nothing's been done.
Thank you, sir. We'll try to get to the bottom of that. Appreciate you coming up and speaking. All right, next, Mr. Larson.
I don't need to use the mic over here.
Guess not.
Nope.
Lynn Larson, 205 Hubble Street. Despite the good work the trustees and the town staff do, more often than not, we citizens come to you with our problems and complaints. You just heard one. And I'm sorry, I have to bring one to you too. Back in August, I sent an email to the elder, Mr. Ollinger, about the lights in the parking lot at Pioneer Park. 2 of them were out and one was acting funky. Later on, I sent an email to one of you, and since that time, all 3 lights in the parking lot are out, and I've discovered that there's a light, well, the light on the sidewalk on the east side of the pavilion has 2 branches, and the light on one of those branches is out. For a while, all the lights in the pavilion were out. At least last night, the pavilion lights were back on, but I just wanted, since the staff doesn't work at night, usually, I thought I'd bring it to your attention that all of those lights are still out as of last night, except, as I said, the pavilion lights. So, thank you for your time.
Thank you, Mr. Larson. Look into that.
We're aware of the issue out there, and we have some electrical problems that we've been trying to solve, so.
Okay, looks like we're on it.
And I'm the
For
one.
3 years?
And I'm the one that Lynn contacted, and I did pass that on, but I didn't follow up, so sorry about that, Lynn.
I think we've had electricians out on site multiple times. They can't diagnose and solve the problem, so we're not electricians, right? And we don't even have any on staff, so we relied on professional contractors and we've struggled to make that work, so
Might be
at least that's
possible-
my understanding.
Might be possible to replace those with solar powered lights if it's really an expensive electrical problem.
I think that might be a reasonable solution, but
All right, we don't have anyone else signed up. Is there anyone else in the room or online that would like to speak?
Mr. Mayor, I didn't sign up.
Sir, yes, please. Please come up to the front, state your name and address, sir.
Mark Morris, 1134 Rubinet Lane. Relatively new resident to Berthoud, been here a little over a year, retired. Worked an entire career as a consultant to cities and counties, primarily on the West Coast, in the areas of public works and contracting and various things, civil, structural, mechanical, background, geotechnical. I just want, you, especially town administrators and staff, tend to hear mostly negative. And so I just thought I'd stand up as a new citizen here, but one that's been coming to meetings recently and just observing, having worked with a couple hundred boards of supervisors and town trustee groups for almost 45 years. You guys all really do a remarkable job. For a town this size, with the resources that would be commensurate in budgets to work with, I have to say, just watching for the last year, I'm highly impressed. And on issues, there are differences at times, but there does seem to be at the heart of each and every one here, as well as staff, and that's a compliment to you, Mr. Kirk, just an abiding love for this town. And it just kind of reaffirms my good decision to buy a home here and move here. So I just thought I'd come up and lay out a little positive love on you here for a minute.
I think we all appreciate that. Thank you.
Thanks so much.
It is Thanksgiving week, so.
Yes.
So, well, we meet twice a month, so
I know.
come on back.
I've been coming.
Can we give him more time? Thank you, Mark.
Was there anyone else, anyone online?
Mayor Karsberg, there is no one.
All right. Well, thank you, everyone who spoke. We can move on now to consent agenda. Do trustees like anything removed from the consent agenda? Otherwise, is there a motion to approve?
I'll move to approve the items on the consent agenda.
Sorry.
All right, trustee Grace made the motion, trustee Hyman seconded. Clerk, we have a roll call vote, please.
Trustee Grace,
Yes.
trustee Hyman,
Yes.
Mayor Pro Tem Dower,
Yes.
trustee Sarcelli,
Yes.
trustee Stevens,
Yes.
Mayor Karsberg.
Yes. Okay, on our regular agenda tonight, first is the Colorado Front Range Trail Design Agreement. This is by our Deputy Town Administrator, Jeremy Olin.
How do you get that? Thing go? Will it go up right away or? Good evening, Mr. Mayor, trustees. Tonight's item is Colorado Front Range Trail Agreement. The city of Loveland has reached out to us again and had another meeting. We typically meet a couple times a year, maybe twice a year in the past several years. As trails are priority and trail connections are priorities for them, as well as for our teams here down at the board committees and the board trustees and the community. So tonight is just reaffirming that, we're talking about, they've reached out to us, they've moved the southern connection to Berthoud, for the CFT up their priority list. They've had some funding, opportunities and some scheduling opportunities to take advantage of some open houses and land acquirement, to begin doing that. So they've noticed us on that and let us know and give us an opportunity to partner with them on some shared costs and some shared expenses. So what you're looking at, I don't know if you can see a mouse or not, but anyway, the CFT, Colorado Front Range Trail, the idea is that it's kind of a backbone through the northern Front Range area down through Longmont, down through Boulder County, continuing on to south through the state, as well as north up through Loveland, up through Fort Collins, as far as Wyoming. And the idea is that the cities and towns and municipalities work as they can to build these things and connect these things. They give kind of a framework, the DOW, and then let the cities, as funds come available and opportunities come available. Well, we have an opportunity to begin partnering with Loveland to get further design and get gather some more information. So what we're talking about on the left side is our trails, 2018 trails map. B, where you see the big B up at the north side of the picture through H. B is the yellow, is into Loveland. That's the area we're talking about. That's the proposed Colorado Front Range Trail for them. They'll meet where it starts at the red for us, at H. And you'll see those big red droplets, those big red balls that come down through almost the western side of what we call town today. On the right side is the same kind of picture. You'll see at the bottom where the pink aligns with the yellow as the Front Range Trail, that's the Lovelands, City of Lovelands Trails Master Plan. Just to show, it's right there at the bottom of the center, just to show that.
That bottom right is blocked by the image.
Oh, it is?
You're not seeing yourself on there. We can't see the bottom right.
Oh, you can't? Oh, I'm sorry, the center right, like the center, the right photo, but the center, you'll see Lone Tree down at the bottom and
Yeah.
Front Range Trail. Do you guys all see that?
Because
Yes.
of the yellow trail?
Yes, sir.
It is
Yeah.
blocked.
Michelle, can you get rid
There
of
it
this?
is.
I am.
Hey,
You got it?
Yeah.
awesome, now we can
We're
see
working
it.
through the kinks. This
No,
is
that's
good.
perfect.
Well, this is a good presentation to get through. So we'll move on. So they've acquired or with the help of us, so the county in partnership with us and the county in 2016, they're calling it the Eagle Vista Natural Area. And just for orientation, this is what we're talking about tonight. On the left is kind of the 30,000 or 60,000 foot view of the natural area where the trail would come down through. There's 700 acres of conservation, public and private lands out in this area. On the right is the 188 or 185 that the city of Loveland has purchased through, I believe it's correct, I don't know how to say it, but the Byer's property.
The Byerwaltis property.
Thank you, yeah. So on the right is on the left is obviously way far out, just to give you some cross streets and things, but on the right, the area in orange is 188 acres. The blue line is kind of an estimated trail that they as they work through this with us. The blue line is what they're responsible for and what they're thinking in general. They've had an open house just recently, 2 weeks ago. They're working on a management plan, and getting public input to manage this area. They've been working through some developments and putting some trails in with the concrete sidewalks and things and using dirt roads at the north side of this, north side of the orange. So as it comes down through the south side, you'll see at the very bottom, you'll see that little red, the highlighted gold is County Road 14 or 42nd Street Southwest to Loveland. We call it County Road 14. If you remember, we have our Jaskowski property along that road as well for orientation. So if you were to leave Berthoud and go through both roundabouts and there's the light, Southern Loveland, you take a left on west, you'd head out there. So this is just right past Huron Lakes Parkway.
Isn't that the Jaskowski barn on the bottom left there, Jeremy?
No,
I don't think it's
Jaskowski's-
that far yet.
Yeah, Jaskowski's farther west.
Further
All right.
west, yeah. This is just right past, just as the north entrance. It'll start right at the
That's
north
the
entrance of
water.
Huron Lakes.
Yep.
And then it'll move west. So the proposal, the partnership is that the city of Loveland is entering in contract with a consultant to do 30% design for their part. And so through our conversations, our meetings, and knowing that we would like to connect as well, they've offered us to kind of take the lead if we want to have an all-encompassing project of the red and the blue and work together on a crossing of County Road 14 with this consultant. The consultants pared down the cost for our section and as well as theirs. Obviously, the consultant's going to come up with the most advantageous route for us along County Road 14 to get to a crossing. The consultant's both gonna look at an at-grade and an underpass, both options. It's gonna take a look at both options and where the best crossing would be. So they just wanna reach out to us. They believe, and I think staff believes as well, that it's better to partner. City of Loveland also wants to go after grant opportunities in 2022. And as you guys are all have the backgrounds about grants, it's better to partner with multiple municipalities and organizations to, it betters your application and things. And then just this is more closer up of what we're doing. The blue comes down through, yellow is a proposed crossing estimated. We won't know until if we do enter an agreement where that'll be just yet, but that's kind of what the city of Loveland is proposing right there. And then our section will be the red. Obviously, the red kind of comes around and tailors down in Huron Lakes Parkway, but I think that's been built and there's some sidewalk there that meets County Road 14. They anticipate the consultants will be done in February, late March. And then Loveland's gonna continue to lead it, looking to grant opportunities, looking to, they're really excited and they hope to get the community excited about moving through there. Big open space, big conservation. There's an eagle's nest back in there. So again, the CFT would run through Huron Lakes Parkway for us, and depending on which way we went, as we improved our trail system as well, it would wrap and come through and maybe up towards Carr Lake and down to meet Longmont. So our portion is, I think they boiled down to just under 23,000 for this work, for 30% design work, and so we're just asking if you'd like to do that.
Okay, thank you, Jeremy. Questions, trustees?
So what'd you say the timing was on this?
They're working, their project's a little bit bigger, so they got, some ground samples and some boring to take. But they got it out to between February and the end of March is their estimate. Obviously, if it goes smoother and well, the closer, but to complete it, to get to 30% and turn everything in, to both municipalities, they're looking February to late March of 2022.
When would,
So 3 months.
Hmm?
3 months
Yes,
from
sir.
now.
Yeah,
Yeah.
3 months.
And
as far as completion,
I don't know that decision has been made.
No.
So there's an opportunity to get the project designed. Once we get to that 30% design level, it's a great time to go after grants. They might also, there's some development work going on the north end of this trail section. That's part of the reason why they're accelerating this. A developer's gonna create a fairly significant chunk of it up towards King Supers. So once we get to that 30% design level, it'll also give us some really good cost estimating, which will give everybody a better sense of how quickly they wanna move forward with construction.
okay.
So our section is really the small piece, but working together with them both to identify the crossing and connection locations is a good opportunity for us, so.
I do have a question. I'm just curious, it seems like, how much is our proportion of it, cost-wise for this?
It's a small fraction. Jeremy,
Yeah.
what's Loveland's portion of the design cost?
Oh, gosh, it's in there, but I wanna say it's 90, almost 90.
I was gonna say, it's close to 100.
Yeah,
And ours
I didn't look at
is
their side, but-
total how much?
Like
Just under
22,000.
22.8 or something like that.
Right, cause I'm just thinking back to some of the various trails and such that we've had designed here. And I don't know, it just seems kind of expensive, is that because of the bridge or the crossing included in it? Is that what really increases the price?
I would say so, absolutely. They're gonna look at both options.
The two crossing designs and the undercrossing in particular is a fairly significant engineering effort. And then just the length of that alignment and the amount of survey work and grading and drainage issues that have to be dealt with. You're within natural areas, you're bound on either side by ditches. It's more complex than it seems, and it's certainly more complex than a trail adjacent to an existing road with an existing road right of way, which is usually what we're doing, and
Right.
it's a little bit simpler,
Okay,
so.
Yeah.
alright, well, that answers my questions, thank you.
Trustee Grace?
I guess the only one I have is when they're surveying this, just so we know what's gonna come back to us here in a few months, the trail crossing where it goes over County Road 14, what portion of that is gonna be on us versus Loveland? I mean, I know we have right of way on it, but is it gonna be half us and half them, like we own half the tunnel? I guess I'm just confused about what that's gonna look like further down.
I mean, common sense tells me it would be almost a 50-50 deal, but that's why they're gonna look at it. They'll come back with that and do the same thing. And what's your portion, what's our portion, what's the options? I'm guessing that's gonna be possibly why the grant opportunity to look at, because those things will, I mean, depending if we go under, over, or grade or underpass, it's gonna be expensive
Sure.
to do so.
Okay.
But yeah, they'll make that determination,
Gotcha.
as we talk through it.
Yeah, and I think some of that'll be for us to negotiate too. You know, we may choose to want an at-grade crossing for cost reasons, and they may really want an underpass, and so we might negotiate a deal with Loveland where they fund a portion of that, even though it's all within our right of way, but I think all that'll come as we get through some of this initial design phase
Sure.
and get to a place where we have a solid idea of what kind of costs we're really looking at.
Okay. Yeah, that's
So
what,
part of this contract will be potential underpass at County Road 14?
Yeah,
Nice.
they're gonna take a look at it.
I think that's
Cool.
great.
Awesome.
Other questions, comments?
The only question I have is these boring and drilling costs, is that all part of engineering? Or am I looking at the wrong thing?
Yeah, I mean, sorry, I left I'm embarrassed to admit, I left my laptop in my truck and my truck got dropped off at the shop this morning, so I'm a little disconnected. Yeah, so, the boring work is for geotechnical analysis, and so as they go through and do that geotech analysis along the length of the route, we're covering a portion of that, just as part of the partnership.
And that's part of the 23,000?
Yeah.
Okay.
We don't have as many boards as they do, I mean, obviously, but that was brought up in conversation too by the consultant.
I just have a quick question. Do you mind if we look at the zoomed out map again?
For what?
I'm still trying to get bearings with what our trail system, like what it currently looks like versus what the planned trails are. So I'm just trying to connect the dots of how this connects either existing trails or is it the beginning of future trails?
It's both.
So can you help me with, like, on the map, might be easier on this, on the left, to show me what's pre-existing that it's gonna connect to, or what do we have to do to follow up to make that go from 14 to Berthoud?
So
Does that make sense?
I know Jeremy might be having a hard time hearing you with masks, but I'll touch on it. The trails that are identified in the Heron Lake subdivision, the ones that are both purple that go around McNeil Reservoir just above the number 2, as well as those light blue dashed lines, those are all being installed by the developer, and most of them are in. I'd say that area around number 1, the vast majority of that is installed. I don't know that I have a percentage for you, but if I had to guess, it's probably in the 75% range.
Okay.
That red dotted line runs down the eastern edge of the Heron Lakes property. They've actually purchased the property on the east side of that red dotted line now as well, or they're in process. I don't know if they've actually closed, but so that they may move that alignment a little bit. So that portion will also get built in partnership with the developer. The section that runs east-west, underneath number 1 out towards Berthoud Parkway, which I don't know if it's easy enough for you to orient here on the map, but there are 2 number 1s. One is up towards the northern end of Heron Lakes and one is over on the east side. Actually, there's 4, but the one I'm talking about is the one that's right above the light blue dashed line.
Yes.
That section is yet to be built, but that will be built by the developer and we would expect within the next 12 to 18 months.
Okay.
That will connect to Berthoud Parkway, where that trail section that runs along Berthoud Parkway down to 287, that's being built as we speak by the Heron Lakes commercial developer. We have a short stretch south of 287 that we're responsible for. And then that will connect to the existing sidewalk along Hammond Farm that we can widen if we so choose into a trail. And then that will connect to that kind of, I guess I would call that like a purple, pink dotted line that runs down Berthoud Parkway. That's the North Berthoud Parkway Trail Gap project that we've talked about a couple of times. We received a grant that we'll be working on this year from CDOT for that project, and that will go all the way down to Wagner Farm Park and connect to that trail system that then connects to Nielsen Greenway and so on and so forth. So
Yeah,
it looks like there's a fairly significant amount of trail yet to be built here, and there is. The vast majority of it is either already funded or under construction.
And can you clarify the B yellow dots? Do you know how far they are on their trail connections? I'm trying to make sure that we are actually connecting the 2 cities, because that's how you
Yeah.
phrased it in here, that's an important juncture there.
So north of County Road 14, or not County Road 14, I always get that wrong. First Street in Loveland, where King Supers is. North of there, I think they are working on or have completed a fairly significant portion of that segment, and that connects and runs all the way to Fort Collins. South of King Supers, there's a large apartment project in Loveland that's under construction right now, and that is building a portion of that trail through their development. And then that basically is where that blue dotted line is, and where that stops and where the yellow starts, that's the section that Loveland is working on in partnership with us. So they're gonna design that yellow dotted line as well as the connection to our red dotted line. And then some of that will be driven by their decision-making and timing for funding and whether or not we can go out and find a grant. But I think, like Jeremy has already talked about, partnership between us, Larimer County, and Loveland for this long trail segment to basically connect Berthoud and Loveland and finish that last gap will, I'm sure, be very competitive from a funding standpoint.
That's very fair. Thank you. That's helpful.
No, and the red dotted line goes down past the clubhouse at Heron Lakes and connects to County Road 10E, which is where the purple comes up from Wagner, and that's part of the gap. And that construction is supposed to happen next summer?
Yeah, well, when we applied for the grant, because we know what grant timelines really look like, our design was planned for 2022 and construction in 2023. We've already begun work on that design, and if we can get it done and we can accelerate and move up that funding to 2022, we will. But our grant timeline is construction in 2023.
Okay. Yeah, it'd be great to get that done, as we've all talked about, so
And so
hopefully.
you did mention one thing that I find interesting, which is the property to the east of the red dotted line that is going to be the North Front Range Trail. And right where it says Heron Lakes, if you look just north and slightly west to that H, if the developer is buying that parcel, then the dead-end road from the county properties, they could do a little spur trail now because they will own that land from that county neighborhood to the Front Range Trail, which would connect that one neighborhood, Heron,
Point.
Heron Point, yes. It would finally connect them because they do connect to that neighborhood, they can walk through.
Correct.
So, when I mean, that's kind of neither here nor there with this discussion, but I just find it interesting that they finally, it looks like it's gonna close as far as the,
We think so.
Purchase?
I hope I didn't scoop their deal, but
Okay.
they've been working on it for quite some time.
Okay.
And have talked to our staff about it a few times. So I don't know if they've closed, they may not, but I know it's something they're actively working on.
so is that something that might be brought forward to the port committee at some point for consideration?
Probably not, in that that it would go through the planning commission as part of the regular annexation, rezoning, and subdivision process.
Okay.
Other questions? Comments? Sounds like we're all in favor.
Yeah, this is a huge deal, right? If we can connect to Loveland, I mean, the trail then would go, Loveland Loop's about 25 miles. It connects all the way out to Greeley. And then you go all the way up to LaPorte, north of Fort Collins. So to think you could go 50, 60, 70 miles on a trail starting at Wagner would be pretty incredible.
Yeah, definitely.
So, which I think it would be really competitive for any grant. So,
We think so too.
I heard Loveland screwed up in one area and it's on a road, but otherwise, the whole other segment is actually a trail. It's kind of frustrating that.
And I apologize for the map. We are cleaning that up, bringing that back to you as part of our goals. This is a 2018 map. Well, at the time, we really needed it, and this is what kind of transpired, but all the colors, and it is kind of challenging to read and understand. So we're cleaning that up as we speak. We're almost done with Logan Simpson, if you remember, and just kind of what we've done and what needs to be done more or less than all the colors and things, so it's easier to read and things like that, and what we've all accomplished together in the last, since 2018, it's quite a bit. It'll definitely change, it'll come down to maybe 3 colors, so, lots been done.
Right on.
That's great.
well, yeah, as has been discussed, the important thing is to have one map that shows existing.
Yep.
And have a second map that shows
Projected.
future, because otherwise everybody looks at this and they're like, oh, wow, I can ride along the railroad tracks.
Yep.
I was gonna say, there's a green trail all the way.
Yeah, I was trying to figure out That means easy.
Don't
Yeah.
confuse, don't confuse.
That means
It is
easy.
listed in the plan as envisioned, but
Red means
not everybody
difficult,
looks at the legend, so.
green means easy.
So you're saying
Yeah,
it's,
that's right.
it's not the Stand By Me trail? Okay.
Yeah, we don't have any double black trails here, so.
All right, any of the trustees like to move on this?
I'll move to approve the town administrator to enter into a service agreement with JUB Consultant to partner with the City of Loveland's Trail Project.
I'll second.
All right, trustee Stevens moved, Mayor Pro Tem Delver seconded. Any final discussion on this? Deputy Clerk, may we have a roll call vote, please?
Mayor Pro Tem Dower,
Yes.
Trustee Grace,
Yes.
Trustee Stevens,
Yes.
Trustee Saraceli, Trustee Hyman,
Yes.
Mayor Karspeck.
Yes. Okay, our final agenda item tonight is the development code updates. This is by our.
Jeremy gets all the fun
development
stuff. Kurt
does
gets
get
all the boring stuff.
That's true.
Planner Kurt Freeze.
Christian took off because he knows if I'm here, it's gonna go late. So. Anyway. All right. So this is the first hearing of these development code updates and revisions. It was approved by the Planning Commission about a month ago at this point. But just a basic slide on a public hearing. So just a reminder, Mayor, that you will have to open it up, although there's not very many people in the audience, which is good. Last year, we, I think the board being, very forward-thinking, decided to kind of adopt a more forward-thinking comprehensive plan. And that comprehensive plan was essentially more of a form-based or transect-based comprehensive plan where, I guess the easy way, form and function. I think everybody understands form and function, where function is, kind of more of the engineering, how this works, whereas the form is the aesthetics, right? Hopefully that makes sense for everybody. So this is more of a aesthetics, kind of more transportation-based plan than a traditional zoning or comprehensive plan, which is more of an aspirational or a legal document, I think. So we went for a different kind of comprehensive plan. And so basically this is the result. So comprehensive plans are, they're not binding, right? They're not an ordinance. They're a vision. So, when that Heron Lakes property comes in for annexation, you would use that comprehensive plan to decide what should it be zoned, should it come into the town, but you might not use the comprehensive plan. It's a guiding principle. So this is putting it into, I guess, practice into code and to make sure that development in the future follows the principles that you set, I guess, in the comprehensive plan. And so while we were doing that, we also cleaned up a lot of sections of the development code before Lynn was here and before I had help. So we noticed a lot of things, and there was just some other minor revisions. And those sections in your packet, we've included the entire section in black, and then the revisions are in red. So, a lot of those pages, we're not rewriting a lot of those sections. There's just the part in red is being revised, just so everybody understands. And I should just say that I have to give thanks to Adam Olinger, who it's the first time he's ever done code updates, but it was very helpful, and very helpful with Lynn. We didn't have too many nits this time before it came to you, so that's really good. And also with Chris, the three of us kind of worked on this together, and I think we're pretty happy with it. And so with the transects, I'll start with the new districts, and then we'll talk about the revised sections, because I doubt those will inspire too many questions, hopefully. I'm not sure.
What are you looking at me for?
I'm not sure. Again, this is first reading, so the intent of this is to give you all just a broad overview, and if there's a lot of questions and concerns, we can answer some of them tonight, but the rest of them can maybe be answered at a later date. You could even set a special meeting, whatever you need. I know this is a lot of stuff, so we're not in a rush because we don't really have any developments that are knocking down the door to go into a new code section right now. So that's a positive thing, and I'll get into that. But the transects, sorry about that. There's basically 5 main transects in the new districts that are being proposed tonight. So rural residential, rural conservation, an urban district, which is kind of a mixed use, very form-based district, and then suburban residential and suburban commercial. So these new districts do not affect any existing property in Berthoud. So I know this is first hearing, and I know a lot of times we're doing development stuff and we have to figure that out tonight. But also with the new districts, this would not affect any existing property in town. So, hopefully that makes you a little more comfortable to think about it. If we're making some major changes tonight, it's only the only people that are gonna be looking at this are going to be looking at these new code districts, and, they're gonna be basically making that decision based on them. So, we are not changing any existing property. And the reason for that, talking to Aaron and some of the developers, there was a lot of concern if we rezone the entire town, or change the zoning district of town, basically it creates a legal nonconformity or grandfathering for most of the town. And there's a lot of issues also if we changed all the existing developments. The existing developers would not, obviously, did not express a lot of support for that because they have vested rights in those developments, and they don't want to lose them. So I guess the goal here that we decided that would be the cleanest, or this is, I guess, what we're bringing forward to you, is that basically all new development, this is our goal. It's all new development, if it's annexed or if it comes into town, if it needs to be rezoned, maybe it's zoned agricultural right now, or they want to change it to commercial or something of that nature, it would come into one of these new districts when these are approved. So that's the goal that would match the comprehensive plan. That's the staff's vision, and hopefully you share that vision, but if not, we can, obviously discuss some changes. So there's obviously time to correct any issues, if they arise. So again, just think about that. Oh, go ahead. Did you have a?
No, sorry.
Oh, okay, I'm sorry. So these were the transects from the comprehensive plan, and I know I mentioned 5, but something to note is that the special districts, that is Mountain Avenue essentially, is already done. So that has an overlay which acts essentially as a zoning district over top of all those properties. It has setbacks, it has all of the design requirements, it has all of that's already done, and that goes down all the way Mountain Avenue. The second one was the special, like the innovation district that was talked about, if you remember from the comprehensive plan on First Street. We decided to reserve this for next year and to do just like Mountain Avenue, maybe a smaller effort, but a similar effort to Mountain Avenue, create a plan, and then we'll be back here after the plan with, I think a lot more, a lot smaller code change just to kind of create that overlay and innovation district for First Street. So that's in the budget, and that'll be hopefully done next year if you choose to fund it. And then New Berthoud, and that, New Berthoud is essentially, the areas around Wilson Ranch or Turion. I think we assume there'll have to be a lot of changes to their PUD. It's an archaic PUD that was kind of designed over 20 years ago, so I don't know that it makes a lot of sense for them to continue with that development pattern. But we did, if you remember, propose future land uses around it. So anyway, so those are kind of the special districts. That's why we didn't go with those. But the rest is all, and then the urban core is pretty much handled by Mountain Avenue. So that Mountain Avenue plan really takes on from Massachusetts to Welch, and that's the commercial areas. And then we feel like the urban area would, if someone was going to rezone, would probably be best suited for the other places in Old Town. So that's just kind of the idea. Again, I'm just trying to refresh you what this was all about. So the transect starts, broad, so rural, what is rural? It's a very broad thing. What is the character of rural? And then, what are those elements to create that rural or that suburban environment? And so that's kind of what you did with the comprehensive plan. And this was the comprehensive plan map on the screen that really set all of those transect areas that we're talking about. So, the important ones here for us to note are really, the yellow is essentially the special use area, which is, like a PUD essentially that's existing that, we have to kind of work through. And maybe they'll rezone to one of these districts. That would be a hope. But the green and the dark green is all rural. The blue is suburban, and then, everything else is urban. Purplish, I guess, purplish and red. So looking at those new districts in your code, hopefully if everybody's got that in front of them, I know it's like 80 pages long. I won't go through every section unless you want me to. But rural residential, there was a lot of communication from the board and what I think the desires were at the comp plan process. And so what we tried to do is kind of put that on paper to create a new code. And so really what we heard was really a desire to allow property owners in the county that are in our GMA some flexibility to come into the town, and if they do so, to be able to preserve open space. That seemed to be the primary goal of the board at the time, so that's what we were trying to meet with these new with this new district. So we don't have a rural residential subdivision right now. We basically have agricultural, which is only 8 properties in Berthoud, so it's very limited in nature. But that agricultural district, is not really intended for, residential use, although it does allow residential use. It's obviously not very well used. So right now, people would just develop in the county if they're outside of town limits, and they didn't want to do a denser development. They would just stay with Larimer County, do a cluster district or a large lot subdivision like you see surrounding town. So what we're, proposing is basically something somewhat similar to that, basically lot size would meet a septic tank size, lot size for Larimer County and just some basic setbacks for rural residential. And then, as you see, like the infrastructure, the tree, the sidewalks, everything like that would, essentially you wouldn't have to do that because it's a rural area. So those are all in this new district, and so you can pull that up. Hopefully it's simple to see with some graphics there too. If you just move to that page, I guess I should move that page. Again, this is not, you're not building a subdivision. Essentially, you're just building more of a rural kind of, well, it is a subdivision, but it's not a traditional subdivision that I think everybody thinks of. So hopefully that makes some sense. And then the conservation lot, and there's some graphics on page 39 of what that looks like.
It's page 62 of our packet.
Oh, I'm sorry, I printed mine out without the packet. Thank you. And so what we're looking at really here is, if you go to this section, it has the uses, it has the site design that has to be required. It has just a general, like it shows the place type, what the place type looks like. Then you have the use table, so the uses that are legally allowed. And then you get into the actual setbacks and the site characteristics of each one of these zones. That kind of set the parameters for the development of each zone. So then the conservation subdivision is, I think kind of thinking about what you were trying to promote with open space preservation around town. So this is kind of a unique, we took some of this from some other places, but the 40 acres, the 8 acres is unique. I mean, that was just something we kind of just thought of, and I don't know if you agree with it or not, but essentially if you were to preserve irrigated farmland or open space and dedicated open space, then you'd be allowed a smaller lot. So you'd be allowed either a 20,000 or 40,000 square foot lot, depending on how much you preserve. So that's how this is kind of set up. And you also have to meet some basic site design, like everything has to be contiguous. All residential land not developed as part of the easement must be held or dedicated as perpetual easement or open space at the town of Berthoud. They cannot be subdivided in the future. Minimize curb cuts on any primary roads. So again, we just want like one curb cut into like one of these conservation subdivisions, much like the Longs Peak Farm. I think it's Longs Farm. To the west, we just want one way in and out, or really two if it's a bigger place, but we don't want a lot of curb cuts on the major roads. About any property abutting Little Thompson River or a designated regional trail as per the comprehensive plan or trails master plan shall dedicate necessary right-of-way for the trail. That was a real goal, I think, of the board, so we put that in there. And then, the port committee would review any of these conservation subdivisions before it would go to the planning commission. So we added that as well, just to give it since it is a conservation subdivision, that seems important that they'd be involved if the town's gonna be accepting some of these. So that's kind of the conservation subdivision in a nutshell. The uses are basically houses and not much else. Greenhouses and agricultural uses, and that's about it. So hopefully that makes sense to everybody. And then this is, it's a wide swath of area that this would, if someone wanted to develop right now, they develop in the county. Now they could develop in the town, and we really probably wouldn't be providing much services to them either if you developed in this rural residential district. So anyway, I'll move forward. So this is just kind of everything that we were talking about with the comp plan. So as you can see, it's all very consistent. So hopefully that makes some sense. So suburban residential is the most difficult, I'd say, of all of these. It's really the challenge, I think, for every community, is really suburban style development. Aesthetically can either go really well or it can not go so well. And it seems to be the style of development that we get the most complaints on, I think, both from you and citizens. And, I think also the things that staff feels like could be better as well. So This probably took the most time of all these districts, and I can tell you that we were looking at code for a few months after, with the comp plan. We looked everywhere, we looked all around the country, contacted the Form-Based Code Institute, looked at a bunch of just standard code, bunch of codes that have been approved throughout the country, and we actually kind of settled on making some revisions to taking the Denver code as actually kind of a template, surprisingly, and making a lot of changes to it. So I just wanted to explain, and then the comp plan is really the foundation of it. So, but just so everybody understands what happened here, but I think the goal of this was really, I didn't say this too much, is to simplify everything as much as possible. And so a lot of these form-based codes are, just one district is 80 pages long. I mean, everything from, every minute detail of a building is called out. And honestly, the first draft or two, we were kind of going down the direction and decided, maybe this isn't the best thing. So and from talking to some of the communities, they're having a lot of issues with them. And they're, it's just like PUDs. In the past, every project requires multiple variances or waivers or rezonings, and they're just having some difficulties, especially for properties that are outside of, I guess, overlay areas or urban areas. But even buildings inside the overlay areas, and I know the last place I was at, we had a lot of issues with this, just have a lot of issues when you get that prescriptive with everything. So that's just kind of a basic overview of what we're trying to do. We're trying to take that and just really nail the form and some of the aesthetics and give some flexibility and just believe that the design guidelines are kind of taking care of a lot of those details but allowing some creativity and some flexibility. So that was really the path that we've taken, and I think it's pretty innovative. I can tell you that no one else in Northern Colorado has got anything close to this right now, and I know the developers have freaked out once I've shown them. So anyway, I just want to give you that little bit of a background. So the suburban character, we've split into residential and commercial. So you'd have an SR district and a SC district. The SR district, this is something that I will say is kind of my idea based on some of the conversations with the community and with the board, and that's removing multifamily from suburban residential. This is somewhat controversial in the fact that I don't know anywhere else that's really doing that. I think it's going to be positive, however, because I think, of course, multifamily would be allowed in the urban district, and we would still allow townhouses and paired homes in the suburban district. But I guess my thought is, especially around this area, and thinking about this, and I'm sorry I'm bringing this up, it's a little controversial, is that the suburban residential apartments I've seen done are usually on the outskirts of each one of these towns. They're usually not very well done. They're not close to amenities. They're not walkable. They're very car-centric. They're very hard on services, so there's a lot of infrastructure. The police have to go out there quite a bit, ambulances, that kind of thing. So, I guess we felt if you're gonna have density, it should be closer to town. It should be urban, or if it's in, when we build the new Berthoud, whenever that happens, the Turion, we would expect there'd be urban areas, but those would be centralized to the new Berthoud, or whatever we wish to call it, or whatever they call it, whenever it comes forward. But, I know they're planning like a centralized commercial and, a higher density area. So the thought would be, if you want to build one of these areas, we don't want to be like Johnstown or Longmont or Firestone, where we've got a lot of apartment buildings kind of off by themselves, especially along the highway, and that's kind of one of the more controversial things. But anyway, again, this follows the same thing. It has the street patterns that it's walkable street patterns. They have to provide dedicated bike lanes. Are always provided. All arterial collector streets, minimum of 10 feet tree lines. Again, just mentioning. Let's see what else. All streets have 7-foot detached tree lines and 5-foot minimum sidewalks. So that's just kind of the first part of it. Setting that vision. It's got the graphic of what it would look, what typical development looks like. Then we get into the uses. So suburban has a lot a lot more uses. So we have suburban house, a duplex to parent home, and then a suburban commercial. So it's kind of split up. Hopefully this makes sense. So there's some more uses that would be allowed. If it's a dark box, it's permitted. If it's a unfilled in box, it's conditional use, which means it requires a hearing that could be turned down or approved. It means it's a use that could create issues to the adjoining areas. And if it's not, if it's blank, it means it's not permitted. And so you'd have to go to a different zoning district. Okay, so again, these are not really use-based per se when we're going to form, but they're, you know, we do have to restrict uses, so that is something that has to be done. Then you get into the standards, so it has kind of the graphics of what that standard suburban and duplex and paired home looks like. Then we get into the residential standards themselves, and it gives you setbacks for each one. There's some changes to this, so they require an architectural emphasis for pedestrian access. So use of a courtyard column or tower element or covered porch with a minimum depth of 6 feet and a minimum square footage of 48 square feet. So that'd be required on everything. So that'd be a big change, especially for some of the tract builders, although I believe they can do it, you know, especially the builders we have. They have models around town. You go to any one of these subdivisions around Metro Denver and you'll see one of their models that does this, so. The garage shall not extend more than 50% of the street facade. And then that there be four-sided architecture in all buildings. So that's, and then for the duplex paired home, it's 40% just because, you know, we got a larger width of the building, so we want less garage because then it would take up kind of the whole visual interest from the street. So, you know, minimum lot area 3,500 and 3,000 square feet, which is very consistent with our current suburban standard. You know, again, the lot width of 40 feet, front yard 2010, you know, we don't have to get into all those details, but that's just kind of a basic idea of the suburban residential. And then suburban commercial, you know, it's somewhat similar to what we have in our code, but there are some changes. Again, you see the setbacks. Access should be only from, or primarily from secondary streets. We're not saying it has to be, but it should be. No surface parking located forward the building and only 20% in the side yard. So again, that's, I should just go to the suburban commercial district, sorry. So again, you've kind of got the diagrams in your packet, which is on page 47 of mine, but I don't know what it is on yours. I'm sorry
Page
about that.
72 of the
Page
packet.
72, so yes, so that's
Page
that kind
47
of,
of the code update.
that's kind of the idea that, you know, the building should be out against the street and we shouldn't be seeing parking. And so, and again, you know, the same thing with the access, you know, we're trying to keep the access on the alley, on the secondary street, not on the main street, just, you know, for better traffic circulation and, you know, that we're trying to make sure that the building is the focal point, not the parking lot, not the cars in the parking lot, or just the access to the lot itself. So that's the goal. You know, architectural emphasis from the street through column, covered porch, etc. Trying to think if there's any other major things here that have some things about drive-throughs that were an addition. The other really major thing, which, you know, you've had a lot of, I know with your goals, with your vision that you set in, I believe, up at Heron Lakes in August. Was it August or July? I can't remember. But I know there's a desire for sustainability and resiliency. And so one of the other major things of this is adopting some really strong landscaping standards and that are water efficient. And this will be probably the most dramatic change of this, with the multifamily coming out as well, and we're just restricting it to houses and the paired type of homes. You know, this was taken, you know, Chris had a lot of good ideas with this because California has already kind of, you know, envisioned the future with reducing water, and they've already been working on this for the last 10 or 15 years. So, you know, we kind of looked at some codes over there, especially Tehachapi, and kind of looked how they were doing things. And so if you're gonna do a suburban residential house, if this was approved, if you were gonna approve a new residential house, so, you know, if Hammond, which I know is some people's favorite subdivisions, I know least favorite subdivisions, but let's just any one of those developments, they would essentially they would have to do a landscape plan for every one of their houses in common. So, right, so if you do 5 or more, if a development platted lot has more than 5 units, all of the front yards would have to have basically, it would all have to be master landscape. So if there's 5 builders, and they have 50 houses, so that, each one would be doing like 10 units of master landscape front yards. And those master landscape front yards would have to be basically, they're gonna have to be water efficient. So only 40% of the front yard can be in turf. They have to plant all of these, basically, it calls out what they can plant that are all basically xeriscape and water friendly type of landscaping. And they have to put in a front tree. So the planning commission wanted to move that to 0.75 caliper from, it was just a ½ inch before, so we did make that change. So that's a big change. So that would, we're already set up to do this with our block diversity plan and with how we accept building permits. So, essentially before you pull a building permit, we would need them to do a master landscape plan for basically the whole subdivision, professionally done. So that's water efficient. Still have some turf.
I think what we're trying to avoid is, front yards that are all grass and one tree. And I think sometimes we forget, we've talked a lot about the importance of architectural diversity in subdivisions and how much that can affect the character of that subdivision. Landscaping has an equally as significant impact on the character of that subdivision. And so, we feel like really well-planned, water-efficient landscapes, heavily planted, there's language in here about monoculture of species is discouraged. There needs to be a variety of plant types. And again, having them designed by landscape architects, they can do it similar to the way they do architectural plans, right? They'll bring in architectural master plans for 12 different floor plans that we approve at once, and they can replicate those throughout the subdivision with minor modifications and elevations and things like that. We would expect the same for landscape plans. So they'll have to provide master landscape plans they can replicate with those models as they replicate those models throughout the subdivision with minor changes to those planting schedules, but as approved ahead of time. Because most often what we see is one landscape contractor rolls in a ton of sod, inefficient irrigation practices, and a lot of places there are no trees included in the front yard landscaping. There's 3 shrubs and a bunch of grass, and it creates a very repetitive and kind of bland, frankly, streetscape, which I think we're trying to avoid to enhance the overall character, and it also, in almost every single instance, is very inefficient from a watering standpoint. So, sorry. This one is important to me, so I hope you don't mind me
Chris
interjecting. But
has told you, we've been working with Northern Water, even the school district about making some of these, water efficiency changes. We've been working on it, and we worked with the Sonoran Institute, and so, next year that will also be rolled out. So this is, I think, for new development, this would be a major change, and I think a major benefit. Again, the rural properties, they're not being irrigated, right? Or if they are, they're already there, or they're farmland. But this is a major, as we're doing this water study with LRE, we're learning just how much water suburban lots waste, essentially, especially at peak times. And that's really our biggest challenge. And so if we can cut that more than in half, almost, this is gonna make it almost into a third of what it otherwise would be. That's a real big water efficiency savings, and still allow you a little bit of turf, so
I love turf, so.
Yeah, I know that Will, you really like turf, that's why we
This
love
conversation
it.
always scares me that we're gonna have a brown development because we're getting rid of anything that needs water. So when we're talking about efficient irrigation practices, what does that mean?
So that means, we'll have a small portion of the front yard that could be sod. Those will be high efficiency irrigation systems. So as part of that professionally landscaped system, the irrigation system will also have to actually be designed and not just kind of done on the fly, which is usually how it is. There are high efficiency rotors, you know, you see the ones that they spray kind of a small stream and they do that in a fan pattern. Those lose a lot less water to wind and evaporation. They're much more efficient in their application of water, so those would be required for irrigating turf areas, and then all the others would be done through drip irrigation. And so those are obviously much more efficient from a watering perspective. And what we don't want is brown front yards, right? That's not what we're looking for, and that's another reason why we think it's important that they be professionally designed. Because frankly, water efficient landscaping that's not done by someone that knows what they're doing can be really bad. And so encouraging well-planted, discouraging monoculture where you just have a couple of shrub types, right? But well-designed, you know, diverse planting, water efficient landscape, I think will be really beautiful in the future. And there's a lot of great examples of those we didn't bring to you tonight, but Kurt referenced, you know,
We can later.
we can bring you some examples of what some of those look like in mature situations. There are actually some really great ones in town. But they're actually easier to maintain too, right? You have less sod to mow, which is your highest maintenance time. Shrubs can be maintained much more infrequently. So as a homeowner, it's actually, it can be easier to maintain over the life of that landscape. But anyway, there are some really good examples and they are not intended to be, I think when we talk about xeriscape and water efficient landscaping, what everyone envisions is Las Vegas or Phoenix. Where it's a front yard of rock and cactus, and that's not what we're talking about at all. So I think when we bring this back to you, we'll bring you some examples of what we're talking about to give you some good context.
Cool.
That was actually gonna be my question, is like, is there gonna be any sort of specific limit on granite, rock, hardscapes in those?
There will be.
Well, I think what we had decided to do, because, you know, from looking at all these codes, it's very hard to set landscaping standards like prescriptively for a front yard. So the best way to go about it, a lot of communities in California have, like we did the design guidelines, they have a very similar type of idea where we would adopt some landscaping guidelines for residential homes that would be hopefully that would be followed, that we'd be following. So, you know, that's where we were going with this. So.
And they'll provide context, they're highly visual. There'll be a lot of sample landscape plans for front yards so that it's really clear what it is we expect. But they'll be very similar in nature to the architectural guidelines. So there's still some flexibility, but it's a lot of do this, don't do that. Not necessarily, you know, you can't have more than, you know, half a ton of rock in your front yard, right? I mean, it's not that prescriptive. But I think we'll be able to show you, and there's I'll just say, the community I came from, we did this before I left, and I think it's a great example. Kurt and I have shared it with Kurt, we've looked at it, we've talked about areas where we think it could be better. But those guidelines are a really good example of what we're talking about. We'll share some of the images and the code sections out of there to give you a flavor of what we'll be doing next year as we build the rest of these landscape guidelines.
And if you remember well, you probably don't remember because that was it's a lot of stuff in your budget, but there is a placeholder in the budget for creating those landscape standards for next year. So that's the goal. I mean, again, this is gonna, someone's gonna have to annex and come into town, and by the time an annexation's done, we'll probably be, if they started today, we would probably be, before they actually started construction, we would definitely be done with all of this. If that
Will you
helps.
be bringing also tree lawns?
Yeah, so one of the things we've talked about a couple of, I think, neat ideas with tree lawns. One of the things that we will include in the landscape guidelines are sample designs for water efficient tree lawns, and by water efficient I mean not sod, because sod tree lawns are really hard to water unless they're 10 feet wide. They're hard to water efficiently. And so along arterials and major collectors where we have a minimum 10-foot tree lawn standard, those will be easily planted in sod, but 7 feet is pretty narrow to even irrigate with overhead irrigation. So we'll have a lot of really good sample tree lawns You could still do sod, we aren't gonna prohibit it. We will require certain types of irrigation for those tree lawns, but we'll also have a lot of really good examples of what they could look like. And we've talked to Northern Water about actually doing demonstration tree lawns down Mountain Avenue on the very southern end of Wagner Farm Park. Kind of like their demonstration gardens behind Northern Water's building, with plant types and explanations, but we thought we could actually show what, kind of do a variety of tree lawns that all look well together, but where you can see, I could plant it like this. I could use mulch and rock, or I can use some other materials, I can use different plantings and kind of demonstrate what that might look like so that it's highly visible and people can walk, they can see the plant types, they can see how it's planted and irrigated, just as another kind of example, so.
I say start out with the 7-Eleven side.
7-Eleven needs some love, but that tree lawn is like 4 feet wide.
Yeah.
I don't know why that was approved like that, a decade ago or however long it was, but it's a very, very small tree lawn.
So moving forward, I'll try to go really quickly. I'm trying to go as quick as I can. I'm sorry if this is taking too long, but hopefully it's okay. So
This is pretty important.
Yeah.
Okay, so then the most exciting district, I think, is the urban district, I guess, for a planner. Anyway, this urban district would allow pretty much anything to be next to each other in an urban setting, any use, so that's a big change. So you can have a house next to a paired home, next to a townhouse, next to a garden home complex, next to an apartment, next to a commercial business. So that's kind of a big change. They have separate setbacks, obviously, if you are going to be next to any of those things. It requires a very urban pattern. So again, urban pattern, what does that mean? It means that you can only access any of these properties either rear loaded or alley loaded only. Or if you do an urban residential house, you can have a 12-foot driveway to a detached house that's fully behind the building. So if you think of, this is kind of something that I couldn't find anywhere. We talked about it. It's like, there's those old subdivisions that, I know my grandfather lived in one, and it was nice, right? He had the garage that was detached in the back, and just a little driveway that went back to it behind the house, and I think we should allow that. There's some subdivisions, sorry. What's going on? So you could do that with an urban residential house. Only everything else is either rear or alley loaded. So that's a big change. If you're next to a street or next to another use, you have kind of another side. And like you can only do 2 stories on that. You can't do the full amount. I'm just trying to do this very generally so I don't get into like a lot of detail. Again, the pedestrian and bicycle connectivity all has to be provided. Minimal setbacks really for most of these. The garden courthouse is something that we're seeing some interest in, and especially some urban areas, and especially as housing prices have kind of gone a little bit crazy. But this means that it's kind of like a condo, but not a but with houses. I guess is kind of a better way to say this, where you're developing like a detached product, but on around a common area that's owned in common, and either it's rented out or it's like condoed out, but it preserves a lot of area, and it's maybe something you see in more urban areas, but with prices the way they're going, this seems to be something that we actually had 2 developers inquire about, could they do this? So it's interesting. So that's an interesting new idea that's in there, but I'll just try to. But that's okay. Oh, well. Again, alley loaded. Again, you have the same landscaping requirements that you'd have in the suburban residential districts. So very very efficient. I could probably go into going on this all day. Because again, it's the same thing. So you have the overall vision. You have some site requirements that, like bicycle lanes, all of that kind of thing. Then you have the uses that are allowed for each specific type of thing you're doing. So this is kind of also new. I don't know anybody else except for a few places that are doing it like this, so houses have basically we're splitting it up that way. Again, they can all be together, and then when we get into the setbacks, you know, they have very specific setbacks. They have some design requirements, as you can see from the tables, that are more than just, you know, normal design requirements. Then at the final part, then you have the landscaping standards. So hopefully everybody understands that. So with that,
If we don't, we'll ask.
yeah, she'll ask. So anyway, I'll stop there. I've talked a lot. But then the minor revisions, that's the rest of your packet. The major changes are really with the parking standards, and that's really kind of come up recently, where we have some of these more alley-loaded projects like Fickle Farm, where they need guest parking, and we've been requiring them to do parking studies. So instead of having them do that, we took the International Traffic Engineers manual and we basically averaged out a guest parking requirement that we're adding to the code. Also added a maximum parking standard, so should Turian ever build like a big box store or you know, big grocery store or something, you know, generally those uses provide too much parking, and we would like to tell them not to provide so much parking because they provide the parking for like the day after Thanksgiving, right? The one time of year that it's the only time of year that they're ever using that much parking. I think we all visualize these older commercial shopping centers. So we want to prevent that from happening should it ever happen in the town of Berthoud. So we've got some maximum parking standards. We also added stacking requirements for drive-throughs. So they're split between food and basically like coffee establishments, and then also between, and then like banks and something, and like a drugstore or something like that. So there's two different standards. We're only 3 cars, which is not very good. You know, if we have a Starbucks going in, if Starbucks had a 3-car stacking, you know, they would basically back up the street all day long because they usually have like 7 or 8 cars in any drive-through, especially in the morning. And so that just does not work. So we also looked at the traffic engineer's model for that. And then the remainder is kind of fixing a lot of the issues with the code. There was some leftover like road standards that weren't removed with Lucas that were just kind of stuck in there that you know, we just didn't really notice. There were a few tiny errors, like when we updated the open space requirements, it said we went to 10%, it still had the 7% like reference, just a reference, and the subdivision requirements, and just some signatures on the subdivision regulations, just some, you know, and basically just correcting some basic errors as you see from the rest of the packet. Nothing else besides really the parking is substantive, I would say. So, and that's it. I tried to go as quickly as I could. I'm sorry.
All right.
It was good.
Mayor,
Yes.
can we take a quick break?
Yeah, I guess we can in the public hearing.
I have to.
Let's take a 5-minute break here.
Thank you.
All right. Good call.
Do you have any Dr. Peppers?
Have about 15 minutes.
we can.
Call the meeting back to order. Let's see, Planner Freeze is done with this presentation, and so Administrator Kirk's saying this is not a public hearing, right?
Because we're introducing this tonight to you, we don't need to hold a public hearing this evening. So,
Okay.
but I would encourage you to take public comment if you're so inclined. We're
Right.
happy to answer any questions you have.
Sure. I guess the order, well, in this case, the order doesn't matter so much, so trustees, do you have any questions? We can start there.
Who
Pick a
wants to go
side,
first?
go down the side.
Let's go right to left, so trustee Stevens.
Oh, there we go, all right.
Okay, you're just.
Come on up, you're the next contestant.
Again, you can submit these and we can have them done for the next time.
Well, it's just stuff to get out
We
the
can work on
open
it.
questions. Okay,
I'll give you a whole memo. It can be pages long.
no, this was plenty. Is there any way to adjust the Mountain Avenue corridor? There have been some situations where, some areas, if we could go another block or whatever, it would, maybe fix some code possibility issues.
Sure, it'll just be a text amendment to the code because it's, it's basically to the center line.
And I don't know if anybody else would wanna look at that or not, but, rather than just going the 2 blocks,
I think we just need to know what areas are you referring to, because it's based on the plan they did, and that's. But I suppose, it can be amended, it's just, we
is
just
there
need
any
to know.
support on that?
Well,
I need more information, so.
yeah, I would too. Are you thinking like Bunyan to Spartan?
Well, I don't know if it's that cut and dry is what I'm saying. There's just some areas, I mean, when we're looking at, even the old, bank building, the town hall area, it's not in the mountain corridor.
No, it's in the court.
Is it? I thought we had said it wasn't.
It's all of Massachusetts,
All
and
of
all of Welch,
Massachusetts,
right?
all of Welch, yep.
I recall that someone
I
saying.
thought that was an issue. If it's not, I'm okay.
Yeah.
That's interesting, I don't know, the HNS wasn't on the Mountain Ave overlay, and they're between Welch and
Yeah.
It applies to properties that are within 150 feet of the center line of Mountain Avenue, correct?
Yeah, but it should have Welch and Massachusetts.
That's what I
No
remember hearing.
specific. If not, we'll check it and make sure, and if that's not the case, we can bring it.
If that's the primary area you're concerned about, I think that's something we could easily handle.
Just handle on an individual basis.
No,
Well, we would bring a text amendment
Yeah.
and just add those streets.
That's the
We
only
just
one
take
that
a
I'm
hearing.
aware of for now. Okay,
oh, that's a
Yeah,
good
no,
clarification.
clarification I think would be good, yeah.
I like that.
I have told you in the past, I believe that was outside of that 150-foot boundary, so if I was wrong, I apologize, but.
Yeah, we'll double check, and I don't know, Aaron, is that something we advertise that section? Because we did make some changes to Mountain Avenue overlay, just some fixes to edit, like Scrivener's errors type of thing, so is that something that could be added for the second hearing? So the ad was very general, the legal notices were very general, so, and then this section was referenced, so,
Well, can we look at that afterwards?
sure.
And going forward, I apologize because I have reference pages and I don't know if I was referencing the packet page or the document page, whatever. Anyway, I'll try to do the best I can.
So the page number on the top right-hand corner of your packet is the packet number, and the page number on the bottom of each page is the page number for the code amendment.
Yeah, I see that now, but then when I was going through, I don't know what page number I put down, but
Oh, no worries, yeah.
we'll figure it out.
Figure it out.
On the heading page, header page versus rural conservation subdivision, just real quick, it says, density allowed would be higher than, for rural, density would be higher than Larimer County allows in similar subdivision. Why are we doing that?
Only if you were conservation easement, conservation subdivision? Why are we doing that?
What's the reason behind that?
I think I was trying to touch on it earlier that, I thought that the goal of the board was to preserve more open space or farmland. And, to do that, for them to not develop an annex into the town, we have to give them some incentive. And so if you can build more lots, by preserving more open space, you may be inclined to come into town instead of developing the county. That's the reason.
Okay, it kind of seemed like the reverse, if you want more open space, why make bigger or smaller lots?
Well, the lot size would reduce if you conserved the lot, the land. So you'd be, so the idea here is you'd save, let's say one of the 80 acres, and you saved an 80-acre farm. And then you can go down to a 20,000 square foot lot, but that would still have to be in a cluster kind of area. So those lots wouldn't be, they're a half acre, right? But then you're preserving the rest of that open space.
Okay.
Whereas in the county, you couldn't get that low, so you'd be adding value to the developer. I don't know if it actually, with the cost of water these days, but it's some step in that direction, so.
And I think maybe an easier way, if I could, I think what we're saying is, you might only be able to develop 5 acres of that 40 acres or whatever, right? If you meet the requirements for the conservation subdivision, this larger irrigated farmland, you could put twice the number of lots. Instead of acre lots, you could do half acre lots in that same developed area. So we're not saying you can increase the amount. We're not saying, you can go from 5 acres of houses to 20 acres of houses. We're saying you could do 20 houses instead of 10 houses within that same buildable area if you meet the requirements for the conservation subdivision, which is a higher level of expectation in terms of dedication of conservation easement or open space.
And then create more open space around that kind of
Correct.
idea?
Yeah.
So
Is that what that is?
it's really me we would be dramatically increasing the developable lot, or amount of developable lots you could create, but at the same time, overall, you would be saving the density would be lower than the county would allow because you're saving so much land.
Okay.
Does that make sense?
It does.
Does that make
Okay.
sense? And so, obviously with each lot and house being the value, if you can have more of them and then save more property, that would be the incentive for the developer, theoretically.
Okay, the next thing was in, go ahead.
No, just one suggestion we might wanna do is maybe do questions section by section.
Oh,
Because I
however
think,
you guys wanna do it.
because I think the rural is something that
Yeah.
is gonna be a lot of discussion, so maybe.
Actually,
You
that was
touched-
the smallest segment of what I had, so
Yeah, well, so maybe we should just all talk
I
about
only have
rural.
16 more
I'll
questions.
talk about rural now.
I'm
Does
kidding.
that make sense?
I agree with you, cause I wanna piggyback on some of the questions that you're asking right now about the rural,
Okay, let's, let me,
maybe not
I
be
have
on this
a
group.
subsection on
Okay.
page 370, okay, let's see, rural. It was kind of broken up, I'm gonna pass it on to whatever questions are, we'll stay on rural for now, I agree.
Is that okay, Will?
Sure. Is that yeah.
Yeah, so my question was on the clustering, because I didn't see any language in here that said anything about requiring clustering or limiting developable areas. So the way I read it, and I could be wrong, but say you had 160 acres, right? So I always try to just imagine like a little case study example. So if you had 160 acres, you could preserve 40 acres and develop 120. So you could get 120 lots on or whatever, you'd have to have some streets and right of ways. So you could get 100 lots or so on a 160 acre parcel by only preserving 40 acres. Is that correct?
Oh, you're not looking at the packet.
Well, it would be, about 85 maybe at most.
Right, but-
By preserving 80 acres, you could do that, but
Well-
an acre lot, so about, it
So
would be
why,
about 40.
why would you,
if you
what would
40.
trigger the 80 acres? I mean, why wouldn't, because the thing I saw said if you do 40 acres of preservation, it allows this, if you do
1 acre
80.
minimum lot, if you do 80, it's 20,000 square foot.
Right, so in my example, if you had 160 acres and you did you preserved 40 acres of irrigated farmland,
Mhm.
how many lots could you do?
So if you had 120 acres, you preserved 40 acres
So
of
you have
farmland.
160.
160, so you have a full, you have a quarter section. Well, then you would be able, and you preserve 40 of it, so that'd be 120 lots you could do.
Okay, and they would be,
1 acre minimum lots.
right, so, but that would mean 3/4 of the property would be developed into 1 acre lots for preserving 40 acres.
That's right.
Okay, and so where does the clustering concept come in on that?
Well, I think it's all the site design, but that's, an interesting point because, I did obviously pull up the Boulder and the Larimer County rural codes when we were writing this, and I didn't see that there, if they had a max on what you could. But of course, they're not doing something like this, so this is a little bit unique, so it's something to think about.
Okay. Yeah, so are we worried about commenting or just asking questions?
Yeah, question, well, let's see here. Yeah, to do both, I guess this isn't a public hearing, so.
Yes, well, from my perspective, that defeats the purpose of having the rural area. So, my vision of this, and I think I mentioned this at a previous meeting, is, down at the end of, the southern end of County Road 17 is Larimer County Rural Land Use Subdivision, which allowed double the 35 acre lots, right? So if you did a conservation easement on 66% of the land, you could do twice the 35 acre density and avoid going through the county subdivision process. So it was a really streamlined subdivision process for twice the density you could do as a use by right under state law. So I think my vision would be we would do a similar thing. So we would take the Larimer County underlying zoning and the Weld County underlying zoning and look at, okay, in Larimer County, you can do 2 acre lots or whatever it is, and I think it's 2 acre lots in FA1. And so that would, on 100.
It's the same as the rural residential, it's basically based on the septic tank, so it's
Okay.
like 2.23 or something acres.
Yeah, right, so in Larimer County, if you had 160 acres, you could do 80 lots. But if you're on sewer, you could do 80 lots, but you can only develop 50% of the property. So if you wanted to do it without sewer, you could only do 40 lots on 50% of the property, and 50% would have to be in a conservation easement. If you were doing it with sewer, then you could do the full 80 lots, but still only on 50% of the land. So I think, two things there. I think we need to base the density bonus on what you would be allowed, because I agree with you, you've gotta have an incentive to do it through the town, not through the county, but I think the density bonus has to be determined by what would be allowed under the current zoning. So maybe you have a 50% bonus for coming into town, but you gotta preserve 60% of the land. I think there needs to be some.
I see what you're saying, so instead of saying 1 acre lot or 20,000 square foot lot, all of these would be the same as our, Weld County's the same, so they're both based on septic tank size, right? If you're on they're assuming you're gonna be on septic, but yeah, you could be on sewer, so there has to be 2 delineations, is what you're saying, septic and sewer. The basic lot sizes for both, and then cap the amount of density you would do on both, so.
Yeah, so I don't think I'm not even that concerned about lot sizes. I think I'm concerned about overall percentage of the property that has to be conserved to get the bonus.
Okay,
So Larimer County, you have to preserve 50% if you go through the conservation development. If you go through the rural land use process, it was 66%. But I think you gotta, I think we would wanna preserve more than 50%. Because when I visually look at Longview Farms, west of town, that doesn't look very rural to me, even though 50% of the land to the west is preserved. So for me, I think it would be like, yeah, you gotta preserve 2/3 of the land and then put the density you're allowed on the remaining 1/3 in return for preserving that 2/3 of the land, and you have to tie some water to the land. Not necessarily the full amount that's there now, because a lot of those farms have way more water than they need. But that would be my vision, and mention something about how, yeah, you gotta cluster the lots onto that 30% of the property. But tell me what they can do in Weld County, because I used to know what the minor subdivision process was in Weld County, and then I heard that they changed it a couple years ago.
Well, County's been tightening up. And actually, this was from Larimer County, and it just, we took their structure and just tried to make some changes, but these are good comments.
So if you had 160 acres in Weld County, and
You can subdivide 5 times,
5 times,
5 times,
meaning 5 lots
5 lots.
on 160 acres.
But they were allowing a lot of those 5-lot exemptions as like agricultural exemptions, and so they were just kept doing 5. The way it's supposed to work for counties is you do 5 lots and that's it. They're supposed to
Yeah.
keep a track of that. And they're supposed to meet either if they're on sewer, but they don't usually do sewer, so it'd be a septic tank size lot with some easement, and they allow easements, which is pretty crazy, to be honest with you. But anyway, instead of access on a road. So they've tightened all that up. I think you actually have to have access on a road. It's now a process that has to go to their planning commission. And they've tightened up that you can't just keep doing these like agricultural exemptions anymore. They stopped that like 2 years ago, I think, if I remember correctly.
Right. So today, if you had 160 acres in Weld County, you could still only do 5 lots?
Now you can only do 5 lots. I think what was happening is they, you give one to your brother and one to your son and one to your wife, and then they would do their own 5 lots as an agricultural, then they would take their quarter of a quarter section and then do their own 5 lots, and that's what was happening.
So basically,
That's
Weld
what I
County is
understand.
way
Not a
more.
Will County planner, so.
No, but Weld County is it sounds like Weld County is much, much more restrictive than Larimer County.
They are. They don't allow cluster housing anymore, or they never did. They were just allowing this agricultural exemption to happen without actually preserving agriculture.
So it seems to me we would wanna tailor our standards, have one density standard for Larimer County and a different density standard for Weld County, because otherwise we're giving a Weld County property, many more times upzoning than, like if Larimer County, we had a 50% density bonus. In Weld County, if you only had a 50% density bonus, you might only be at 7.5 lots, it sounds like.
Well, and I think from my perspective, we just want one set of rules. So what does rural residential mean if you annex into the town of Berthoud? If that means you have to preserve 66% or more of the property, and you can develop the other portion in a clustered fashion with a higher density lot than you might be allowed otherwise, to me, it shouldn't matter whether or not, because once you annex into the town of Berthoud, whether or not you're in Weld County or Larimer County is marginally relevant. I do think what you're suggesting is realistic, but that's true of any Weld County property that annexes into the town and rezones, right? They rezone into whatever our zoning designation is, and then they get the benefit of the fact that they have a whole lot more opportunity to them than they might if they were an agricultural property in Weld County. So for me, it just seems like one clear set of rules. What does rural residential mean? We're not trying to incentivize anybody to annex into the town and develop rural residential. We're just saying if you wanted to, this is what it would look like. They still might choose not to annex in and develop, and the reality is rural residential without a sewer system for these smaller lots isn't gonna happen, because you're not gonna get a septic tank on a 20,000 acre lot, or a 20,000 square foot lot, excuse me. And so you'll have to run sewer infrastructure, and the cost of that is gonna be pretty prohibitive, except for areas of town that are immediately adjacent to developed existing infrastructure. What it will do is, I think, there might be some of that rural residential developed immediately adjacent to the suburban residential areas we plan in the comp plan as those build out, right, as infrastructure gets extended. But what it will do is kind of slow down that progression out, right? Because the cost to extend infrastructure over great distance is never gonna be paid back on a conservation subdivision. And so until the infrastructure builds out to you, it won't make any sense to annex in and do any of this anyway.
Yeah, except that I think I would be fine, so if, back to the 160 acre example, if you preserved 100 acres of that and you did 32 acre lots on the remaining 60 acres, so you can have septic, I think that might, if you clustered those, properly, you could, still have a really rural character with, 2/3 of the land being preserved. So I don't know that we wanna set it up so that you have to run sewer, because then you're right, that's gonna be a huge impediment.
I'm just suggesting the bonus of having smaller lot sizes so that you can, cause the only reason why having smaller lot sizes is a bonus is cause now you can sell, instead of you can sell 4 times the number of lots, basically, that you would if you only had 2 acres. Now, those would be less valuable lots, but in aggregate, I think they'll end up being more valuable, right? So you could develop 2 acre lots under the scenario you described if you annexed into the town of Berthoud on septic. Because we're saying it's a 1 acre minimum lot size, so they might have to do 2 if they're not gonna extend sewer anyway. We just need to confirm that would give them reason to annex into the town and then develop under our guidelines rather than the county's. Because if they could do that in the county anyway, there's no reason for them to annex.
Yeah, that was the goal. I mean, this is, just trying to, but I hear your comments, Jeff, and I think.
Yeah, no, I think the goal and what you guys are saying is the intent, all of that is completely accurate. I just think that, and I don't have the answer off the top of my head, but I don't think the way it's currently set up is gonna achieve what we were hoping to achieve.
Well, I think your comment about, we set it up at 40 and 80 acres of irrigatable farmland, right? So that, you're not saying, let's divide that 80 acres up into these thin strips around some cluster that then are not really suitable for irrigation, for agricultural irrigation. But I hear what you're saying, that it should be a percentage of the property that's developed. In that 160 acre example, if you preserved 40 acres, you could get 120 lots. If you preserved 80 acres, you could actually get 160 lots on the remaining 80. So you could get more lots, which again, I think in aggregate would be more valuable for the developer. And it also might justify extending infrastructure to those 160 lots, but you'd only be preserving 50% of the property in that 160 acre example. And if you took let's say you took a full section, right? Somebody bought a whole section of property and you only preserved 80 acres of that 460 acres, that wouldn't achieve the goal at all, right? So I think I understand what you're saying. We can go back and talk through some of
Yeah, we
that.
can go through some of that. Do you like the idea of the irrigated farmland and the open space?
Yeah, I think
Splitting that up or having like 2 different categories for that, or not? Because I mean, that's,
No, I think having a requirement that water is tied to the residual land is really important, because if it doesn't, then it's definitely not gonna be a farm. But yeah, I think, like I said, I think somehow we gotta have a maximum density and
maximum density.
a minimum percentage that's, greater, 60% or greater of the overall land, because even, preserve 80 and you do 160 houses, I mean, that doesn't feel rural, right? That's gonna be just an island subdivision in the middle of nowhere, so.
Yeah, I mean,
And
that's a
I
good
think,
point. That's a good point.
half acre lots, with 80 acres of open space, I would describe as rural residential, but I would agree that it doesn't feel agricultural rural at all.
Right.
And so I think that's we've had a really difficult time striking this balance, and, but I think what I'm hearing is there's a much higher, we should focus much more on the agricultural preservation and less on the lot development, which wasn't what we weren't trying to focus on lot development. We were just trying to figure out, how do we make this workable enough that somebody would even do it? Because if they don't, then all of our comp plan is irrelevant, really, right? I mean, if nobody ever develops in that rural residential area, then that future vision is, and if it just stays farms, then I think that's fine too. I mean, that's really kind of what the vision talked about, but.
We can make that change.
No, if
This was
Weld
a
County
shot-
only
this is a
allows
shot
5
at-
lots,
So,
then it'd be great if all the Weld County land just stayed in Weld County. So,
yeah, I mean, right now, that's how it would work, but, yeah, so
Anyway.
no one else is doing this with irrigated farmland, or no one else is doing it. So this was kind of a,
I'm not criticizing your,
dice,
not
but
criticizing
you
the
have a
work.
really good idea, so I
This is
think. we'll get that
admirable
changed.
that Berthoud is charting new ground here. This is awesome.
Anything else on the rural residential?
Yes.
Mayor Pro Tem?
So with the rural residential, I appreciate the conversation you guys have had. And yeah, basing it on a percentage of the land that is there versus giving, putting acreage, qualifiers on it. A percentage would be better, and obviously there's going to be a certain percentage that is doable with the irrigation equipment that's available to farmers right now, so that's probably gonna play into it. The one thing that I really would like to see is specific wording saying that the clustering cannot be in like the corner closest to the main road where they have, 20 homes clustered right next to the road, and it just looks like any other suburban development. I hate to do it, but Longview Farm, it looks like it should have been annexed into the town because there are so many homes in there. It's like a suburban neighborhood. Or just barely rural residential. Those homes are really close in. So one thing, some wording that would say it has to be so many feet away from the main road, so that from the road, while you're driving down the road, there is open land and you can see the views of the mountains. And the subdivision is just a little farther away.
I hear you, and we'll do that. That's a great idea.
Okay,
I do think the one caveat, and we've talked about this a little bit, is how does that impact irrigating what's left, right? And so the farther you push that development into the middle of that farm, the harder it becomes to irrigate, right? So I mean, if you think about a quarter section and you got 4 40-acre parcels, and let's say you were gonna conserve 3/4 of it, ideally you would conserve, that L shape, because then you could easily irrigate that
You
with the
could
center
do the
pivot,
pivot.
right?
right.
And so you would wanna tuck everything into the corner.
But
And
does it
so
have
if
to
you
be
push
the
that into the
corner?
middle, you might impact the ability to irrigate that land. So I
Right.
think that's part of and maybe we just leave some language in there about, needing to preserve the opportunity to irrigate that farmland, because otherwise I think that creates some problems too. So it's just
Well,
something to
if we've
consider.
got, if we've got a square, right, and we've got a pivot sprinkler, and it's set up from one angle or another, the opportunity might be there to pick a corner of it that is farther away from the main road. And so, no, it's something that isn't going to be possible in every instance, right? But I think that there has to be a benchmark that says, this is this is how far away from the main road you should be. Figure out where you wanna put it based on that, and if that's really a hardship and you can't do that, then talk to us.
So maybe we just do a buffer area or a setback from the road,
A setback from the road,
or a buffer area.
if possible, and
I
if
think
it's, but
It's doable,
allow
very
for
easily,
variances, but to just
Sure.
say, to have nothing in there about it, they're all gonna put it right up against the road, and it's just gonna feel like, slightly larger rural residential lots instead of actual conservation easement. So that would be my comment. I don't know if anyone else would support having some sort of wording in there.
I like the setback.
Yeah, so I agree. Part of the goal is preserve working agricultural land. The second goal is to preserve the rural character. So I think that would be important.
And I would assume that from a priority standpoint, preserving the agricultural land as workable agricultural land is first priority, and second priority is maintaining a more rural character, or the other way around, because I think those could be a conflict those could be in conflict at times. So from a priority standpoint, I think it's important that we talk about.
I think rural character would be my priority, but
Well, you know, we've split this out between just dedicating open space and dedicating irrigated farmland. Maybe we have two separate, we keep it like that. We have two separate goals. You know, if you want to save farmland, maybe there's a little more flexibility on the setback and the buffer area. And maybe if you want to preserve open space in rural area, then, you know, we're a lot stricter. That has to be.
I mean,
Central.
not
That
all
would make sense to
farming
me.
is,
Does that make sense?
not all farming is irrigated farming, there's dry land farming too, so to predicate it all on can we irrigate it or not is maybe not the best point of view to take it from. There's a lot of dry land farming that can be done. So yeah, if you're looking at rural character versus agriculture, which one is going to take precedent? In my mind, I would really like to focus on making sure when you're driving down the road, there's rural character. That would be my preference.
I think if we can have a setback for both, but then we can maybe kill two birds with one stone. Maybe. Hopefully
with one sprinkler head.
with one sprinkler head, maybe, you know, so you know, one is a little different. You know, we're trying, you know, I think it's probably less likely that people are, you know, dedicate irrigated farmland, but, you know, should they, we want to make sure it can be irrigated. So it's just slightly different.
And again, I think from a rural residential perspective, you know, 2-acre lots in the county, which is the vast majority of West Berthoud, right? They're just, when you look at an aerial map on the GIS, it's just a whole bunch of 2-acre lot subdivisions, right?
Right.
A lot of people would argue that's just rural residential. But there's no active farmland on any of those, unless they're just, you know, knocking down some dryland grass. They might bale into some marginally useful material. And so I think that's what we struggled with too. It's like, that's rural residential in really everywhere else in the country. And what we've talked a lot about is how do we then also preserve agriculture, which is really one of the high priorities that we've talked about. And so we could keep a rural character in those areas by just allowing people to carve up 2-acre minimum lots. And I would argue that would maintain a rural residential character. I don't think that's the goal that we're trying to achieve though. At least that wasn't my sense of it. So
Right, so
that's the odd balance that I think we're trying to strike, and honestly, it's why most cities don't do rural residential, right? That's how you develop in the county, not in the city, and so this is a unique thing. There's just not a lot of good examples out there for, so I think we've heard a lot of good discussion though.
Yeah, I think we can come with, I think, you know, revised recommendation.
Yeah.
Look at the Bueller acres, so the density isn't,
oh, that's a good
Bueller
example.
acres is a good example of
I'm
what
not
I
sure I
think.
know which one that is.
So it's the end of County Road 17, southern end. It's the road that goes up the hill into the private
Sure.
development.
Yeah.
And you have to go
And
way
it's
up.
it's surrounded by both non-irrigated open space that I think are outlots, and then there's an irrigated farm along County Road 2. But the houses, you know, there's 10 or 11 lots clustered up away from the road, so you kind of get both. The density is not applicable because, like I said, that was a 35-acre underlying zoning. So, but anyway, I think that's a good example of clustering.
Yeah, and that one, so if you could imagine a pivot sprinkler on that property, right? And 3/4 of, if it was flat, and 3/4 of that was irrigated, then the quarter that was the lots were put onto are in the far corner. They're not right up on the main road. They're farther back. And so for me, that's kind of where I'm looking at it from is yeah, I think the Bueller Green Acres neighborhood
And
is
that
a good
absolutely
one.
works on that kind of, it's not a square, right? That's a very long, kind of almost narrow setup. And so it does make sense, absolutely, in those instances, kind of push the development back. In a traditional kind of county section development pattern where it's all just a big grid and it's all flat squares, I think that's where we struggle to make that work. But
You could have a road go up on the one side or the other of it. The access road could be up on the property line
mhm.
to go to one of the back corners.
Yep.
And so that's, you know, that's what I'm suggesting. When I would drive around, that's what I'd wanna see. Is that if it's gonna be irrigated farmland and in production, then if we could get the cluster of homes away from the front road. Cause otherwise it'll look like cluster of homes, rural residential, verging on suburban, and then a farm, and then another cluster of homes, and then a farm, and it doesn't quite give the same feel as if the homes were farther back from the road, but I don't wanna beat a dead horse.
No,
I think you
I
guys
think we
get
hear
it.
what you're saying. Those are good comments.
So
Said
just
we'll
one other
make a
suggestion.
change.
I think-
Then we'll move on.
Okay, sorry. No, I think you could pick a couple of example properties, like one in Larimer County, one in Well County, not by name or anything, but just take a property out east of town and say, okay, under these rules, what could happen here? On this property over here in Larimer County, and just sort of do a little case study and just see what it would yield, because I think that'll give us a much better guidance.
Okay.
I mean, we're, like I said, we're not in a rush, so, there's no one dying for these to be passed like tomorrow so I mean, if we can make these revisions from what you're saying and we can do it the next meeting, or you can set it for a meeting, next year. It's, wanna make sure you get what you envision, so.
Okay, I guess we're gonna go by district, so or is there anything else on the rural conservation subdivision?
Ish.
Go ahead.
It kind of touches all three, but it's more specifically the non-pot systems for, I guess, irrigation systems, so I guess public areas, irrigated from ponds. Is that something that we could include in this moving forward? I know that in terms of conserving water and resources is probably one of the best things we can do. But is there something we can do to incentivize that, to put non-pot systems, like for local watering, for parks, or is that just kind of a poor idea?
You want to restrict, if they're the developable area, you don't want them to basically be using just regular potable water on their lots, right? So if they
Right,
have-
so, yeah, like, as Administrator Kirk said, one of the biggest wastes of water is, they treat all this water, they do all this good work to it, and we throw it right back into the ground to keep, some turf alive, which is great, but it's kind of wasteful. And I get that you can't do it necessarily in suburban areas, but just kind of in general, encouraging non-pot systems for plant irrigation. Is it something we can throw in there so that it's?
I mean, we can
something
definitely
do in the future?
say non-pot's encouraged, because the
And I
only
think
problem would
from a
be,
practical standpoint, that's already the case. Heron
Yeah.
Lakes is, all of their outdoor irrigation is on a non-pot system. Farmstead's outdoor irrigation is on a non-pot system. Gateways is on a non-pot system.
Okay.
So there are a lot of subdivisions that already have non-pot systems. What we also find with those is that the cost of non-pot water is less. And so, there's less incentive to conserve in that sense from a financial perspective. So I think those two things have to go hand in hand, right? Landscape design and non-pot use. But there's a lot of reason not to put treated water on landscape.
Sure.
So yeah, I think that's a good comment too.
in our development water dedication ordinance, also, once when you get up to an acre, it gets really expensive. In fact, you have to do your own irrigated landscape plan to determine it, but you're essentially, would be, let's see, I'm trying to think, it would be 4 times, it's actually 1.5, hold on, so it's like, I think 5 times, and then you have to actually have it reviewed by an engineer, once when you get over an acre. So that's the way it's set up right now. So it'd be a very expensive, it's gonna be almost $100,000 in water just for the lot, but when you're buying a multi-million-dollar house on your half acre next to some farmland, I guess that really doesn't mean anything, so maybe I should just shut up about that.
Throw up in the bucket.
So,
So our water dedication policy encourages non-pot because it's less expensive. And so that's frankly why Farmstead and Heron Lakes put in non-pot systems, because it brings down the cost of water dedication. And so that incentive will still exist regardless of the code, but I think I do think we want to encourage the development of non-pot systems for open space irrigation, public
Right.
landscape areas, and even yards.
Right, and that's kind of what I was hoping we could do, and add that in here while we're working with all of this as a kind of a holistic approach.
it's very easy to add.
That's all I had for that.
Okay. Suburban district. Trustee Stevens, we'll start over there.
They really, I kind of go along with you, Kurt, as far as single-family homes in the suburban district. In fact, I have a question, why are we even allowing, or why are we encouraging duplexes?
Paired homes, well, we require 20% of every subdivision to have a mixture of uses to hopefully encourage some, both a more interesting kind of development pattern and some affordability. And it seems to be working pretty well without doing a deed restricting those properties. It seems to be working actually extremely well, so.
Well, I know that there's a lot of people that are, well, I shouldn't say a lot, but there's people that like the cottages, which are, in my opinion, questionable if they're more affordable or not. But, I mean,
A cottage under the old, that section of the design guidelines or the block diversity standards would qualify as this different use than a single-family house. So it's in another section of the code. So if
Okay,
you
and I have
could do a
nothing-
cottage,
yeah.
you could do a paired home, you could do a duplex.
so you could do any in what you just said, if it meets the lot requirements and,
Yeah, you would just, the thing is you'd have to have a 3,000 or 3,500 square foot lot,
which is a lot of wasted space for a cottage.
Not
I mean,
really.
all of David Gregg's cottages are usually 3,000 square foot homes. I mean, we could make it a little bit smaller if you'd
The
like.
cottages are 3,000 square foot?
They're the lot sizes.
Oh,
Up at
okay.
Prairie Star. I
Um,
think the smallest he has is like 2,500 square feet, or 24, like 80.
They're pretty tiny.
In
Pretty
terms of lot
small.
size.
And
In terms of
relative
lot
to,
size. Not the house. The houses are like 1,000 or 800 square feet.
and relative to, R2, which is what
Yeah, that's something we can look at.
would be 2,700 square foot lot is minimum,
Mhm.
with a 20-foot wide lot. And while I'm here, can you explain the zero lot line? What does that mean?
Well, for like a paired home or a zero lot line home, it's essentially, you're aware of like townhouses, right?
Yeah,
You
but,
understand? So they have a firewall, so there's a lot line, and then your firewall, which is,
I
fire
understand.
rated on
yeah.
each side, goes all the way up to, so you're building a house on the actual lot line.
Okay,
And so you don't have a setback from the lot
but
line.
as far
So
as
it's
the
all
outside
based
of
on
the building, the whole building, you still have to adhere to the 5-foot offset from property line.
Yes, for the whole building, for the other side.
Okay,
So for the
alright.
other side has to be like basically, or you have to fire rate it. So it's
Alright.
all based on really the building code.
Okay, so that really would not apply to a cottage home.
You could do a small duplex, I suppose, but, the lot size, you
But
can
I
do
mean,
that
with
now.
a 20-foot wide lot,
Well, you
So what
could
do you say
put it up
cottage,
against
what
the
do you mean
property.
I'm talking about David Gregg cottages when they're single-family homes,
Detached.
detached.
Yeah, a zero lot line home means you could put 2 cottages up against the property line with a fire rated wall.
Okay, I see, so
And then
make it a duplex,
You'd have,
okay.
still have the setback on the opposite ends, but we haven't seen that, but I mean, it possibly could happen here eventually with housing prices keep going up, they might start doing something.
Yeah, well,
But in that instance, it wouldn't be a cottage, it would be a paired home.
Yeah, it would be a pair of
Okay, so
it would just be the
okay.
same size.
That's, and thanks for clearing that up, I wasn't quite sure, I know what a duplex, fourplex, and,
Yeah,
Zero
zero lot
property line,
line, and there's a
okay.
lot of different ways to say it, paired home, a duplex means you could, a paired home and a duplex are almost the same thing, but in, I guess legally, you could do a duplex where you own, the lot is owned in common between the 2 units, right?
okay,
And so, you own the unit and, basically, right, it's like kind of like a condo, so it doesn't have to be a property line. And you could do a lower fire rated wall. Does that make sense?
yeah,
That's the common way that's the way they used to in like the 50s and 60s, right? But people have gotten away from that because of insurance, so
okay.
I'm sure Jeff probably is pretty aware of all that stuff too, so.
I think it was just more clarification on the zero lot line, and now you say that, it makes complete sense. Other than, I think most of my stuff is on urban, so
Okay.
concede to everyone else.
Other suburban comments, questions?
I just had one.
Mrs. Orselli?
This is where we talked about requires the master landscape plan, right?
Yes.
I just was curious if we've talked to developers to see how that affects their willingness to work in town. I mean, not that, I don't mind slowing development down and making sure that it's more aesthetic. I'm just curious how that impacts that working relationship and if you think they'd be amenable to that.
It will cost them more to do the professionally landscaped yards. And so anytime we cost the developers or the builders more money, they don't particularly care for that. I can tell you where I've done it before, we had a lot of complaints and then they just kept building anyway with really nice front yards.
And again, this will probably be borne by the builder, not the developer.
That's right, yeah, the
I mean,
builders.
the developer could do it, but with everything we have in Berthoud, that's not the case. I mean, they put everything they can on the builder. Every single development we have here, whether they have a metro district or not, they will put everything on the builder. So it's the builder that's gonna bear this cost, not the developer,
Well, and-
most likely.
And for the record, I love that idea. I think that's gonna be amazing, so I just wanna make sure it's sustainable that we can implement that because I think having the landscape standard is gonna change a lot of our development, so thank you. That's all I got for that.
Trustee Stevens? Did you have something for suburban?
No, I started.
Was it you?
Well, no, I think the only reason I was confused was down here it says required four-side architecture on all houses. So, and then I saw the 0 lot line, that's why I got confused, but anyway,
Yes, obviously that would not happen.
okay, all right, so,
We could try.
all right,
Could be interesting.
that's all I had.
Okay, anyone else for suburban?
Well, yeah, so I think,
I'll have one or two.
so Kurt, you said in your presentation, and I think you're right, that taking out multifamily out of suburban districts is a radical change, and I think, just from my perspective, I think that's been one of the more unique things about Berthoud that we've done well, even when we weren't doing other things well, is that we've required multifamily as part of every development, and I understand what you're saying about walkability and cars, but if the single-family suburban neighborhood is all cars anyway, I don't really, it's not like anyway, so what I think, what I've always used as an example of what we don't want is the 4-story apartments north of Walmart, just north of Longmont, right? You don't want this high-density complex of just all renters or whatever. So I think mixing in, so I like the fact that Rose Farm has the corner that's multifamily that mixes in with the neighborhood, and I like the townhomes by the high school. So I think that the intent of that has always been diversity and affordability. And I think, where it gets questionable is like trails at Sugar Creek, where all of a sudden, they were proposing to build them down at County Road 4 and County Road 17, and I'm not sure that made sense, but I think in the end, they incorporated that more into the middle, a better location in their development. But I think, having entry-level housing as part of every development is something I really support, and I know that entry-level isn't today isn't what, people would consider necessarily totally affordable, but it's all relative, right? If houses are selling for $600 and you could buy a townhome for $350, then I think that counts as affordable in this market. But anyway, I've always used my own street as the example, right? So there's 4 corners on our street, and 3 of them are houses, and 1 of them is 2 fourplexes. And I think it really works, and it doesn't, by mixing it in like that, it doesn't cause parking problems, it doesn't seem to cause a lot of issues. Have there been police issues? Yes.
Do you think maybe townhouses could be added? Because, I was thinking, you wouldn't be able to really, or you shouldn't be, hopefully, in the future. The urban is really restricted to the urban areas of town, right? That urban, where it's set in the comprehensive plan, so we're really
we don't have very many urban areas on the comp plan.
We don't, but would you think townhouses would be a good idea? Or do you just think we should allow I think, Chris had, I think, kind of a similar, and I was kind of wanting to try to do something radical here, so I agree with what you're saying, but at the same time, I'm just, if we added the townhouses, does that add that extra, affordability? And then we get away from these 4-story, these islands of apartments that are suburban.
So I'll just give you, the stuff I like is like the row houses behind Hayes on the north side of Welch. The cottages at 8th and Welch, which is what I think of when you say cottages, and those are, I believe, attached, but they have, good neighborhood character. The townhomes by the high school on 8th, I think architecturally are too massive, but I think that having, that little infill cluster, so that's the kind of stuff I think works well. So I don't know what that would be, if that's townhomes or.
Yeah, townhome,
or
there's a
whatever,
row
but-
house in the urban. I think we could just kind of make a few little tweaks to that, and we could add it into the suburban residential. if that
Anyway,
would-
that was my only comment, is that I think.
No, I think
it-
that's fair. I mean, Chris.
It works to mix that
As
in.
well, that was just kind of my,
Anyway,
so.
I think it brings up the level of the, it raises up the level, the quality level of the multifamily to have it mixed in with single family.
And I will say, I think I understood what Kurt was trying to do.
Yeah.
And that is, again, plopping these high-density apartment complexes into a suburban area that's disconnected from parks and services and all these other things, which is what we often see in suburban areas, right? There's a suburban neighborhood and there's this giant apartment complex just packed with cars. And nobody can walk anywhere because Heron Point's a good example.
Heron Point is an example of.
Heron Point
could've
is
done better.
really disconnected, and it's not even a really high density apartment complex, right? We're talking about 2-story apartment units. They're not massive in scale.
I like them, it doesn't bother me any.
And they're not a bad, I don't think they're a bad product per se. But what we're saying is we think that kind of density should be in urban areas where it is more walkable. It's not as auto-centric.
Yeah, I was thinking specifically, I went to somebody's, I don't know what I was picking up or something. They had an apartment complex in Firestone. If you know wherever all those hotels and everything is, you come off of the highway, if you keep going back on those streets, there's like just rows of giant apartments. I went back there and it was like it was horrible. It looked like Russia, it looked like the Soviet Union. And it just didn't seem, I'm not trying to be rude about
No,
it, but I mean, and those people deserve to live, but it just wasn't, there was nothing else there, right? And there was nowhere for those people to go. It just was
Nothing to do.
nothing to do but a highway next to them and
Popeyes over there.
parking lot.
Well, that's what I think we should avoid, is
Yes,
having
that's what I was
that,
trying, I think.
that's what we should avoid, is having a huge cluster. We should have just a little mix, like the
Okay.
multifamily at Heritage Ridge and the multifamily at
No,
Rose Farm
I
are a
agree.
small percentage of the units.
Okay,
I
so
like that.
I will say, I'm gonna jump in here.
Yeah.
I like what you did, Kurt. I thought it sounded great, because I think I got the vision that you were trying to, put out there. That, yeah, we don't want these big clusters of apartment complexes on the periphery, wherever they can throw them in. But I also get that we wanna have these mixed neighborhoods, that's already it's already part of our plans. So what I kind of see is, yes, in as a mixed development in trying to keep our neighborhoods really a mix of different income levels, et cetera. Going from the cottages, the paired homes, the townhomes, and all those sorts of things, I think do provide a good mix. And for example, in Gateway Park, that whole first row, those are all rentals. And, they're all, they're fourplexes essentially, right?
Mhm.
But that provides rental properties, and it does add to the mix of the neighborhood, and it's great. However, if we have really high density, like true apartments, flats, you know, where it's multi-story and it's really dense. I agree with your thought process where those super dense ones really do belong in more of the urban centers. And we have more than just downtown, Berthoud, we have other areas,
Yeah, we
that are
have some
gonna
other
become,
areas for urban.
right?
We
Because
do.
wasn't there some purple districts up in Heron Lakes?
No,
I don't
that's-
think on Heron Lakes, but
Yeah.
there's a lot of urban along First Street corridor.
Right,
Obviously, all kind of downtown areas urban. Kurt can bring up the future land use map.
yeah, thank you, yeah, there it is. So,
So, and actually, no, you're right, there are some general urban areas identified in the Heron Lake subdivision, for kind of townhouse style development.
right, and so there are places other than just, you know, there are additional places where it could fit in. And so I'll just throw that out there, that I do think that keeping a mix like we already have is great. Especially if we can offer townhomes, that might be rental properties. So we keep the mix of rental and owners. But putting the really high dense stuff, yeah, I agree with what you suggested.
Can I
It sounds like.
Good.
add something? I agree as well. The only thing about the high density stuff in the urban area is it's all along 56, it's all along Mountain Avenue. And I know we've all talked about not having that, you know, having big apartments on their way into Berthoud. So if that's going to end up being really high density and having apartments all the way along 56, I think we're defeating the purpose.
But that's not what's on our land use
That's not what's on
map.
our land use map.
Yeah.
If you put,
It's yellow, isn't
if you
it?
go back
No,
to
it's
the,
purple.
Yellow is the Mountain Avenue overlay
Overlay.
plan.
yeah, and
So what's all this yellow out here at?
that's New Birth, that's the special district. If you
Anything
see-
that's yellow is a special district that would require either PUD zoning like Turion or the Mountain Avenue overlay plan, or the First Street corridor where we plan to do a First Street corridor overlay plan.
Okay, I back up. I like the mixed use. I like what we've done so far, as long as it's not what you see as you enter into Berthoud.
It sounds like, I think I got it. I think we wanna make sure cottages work with the current standard. We wanna make sure that we add townhouses, fourplexes, which is all kind of row houses. But otherwise, that
I'm not-
sounds good, right? That's what everybody is.
Townhomes, I think our definition of cottages are different. But we'll get onto the
We'll
urban
check
part.
to make sure that, I'll just talk to David actually really quickly, and yeah, we'll make sure that works.
Okay, other suburban questions or comments?
So isn't a 0.75 diameter caliper tree like a twig?
Yep.
It's pretty small.
Pretty small, yeah.
Wouldn't we want to just require 1.5 inches like we do for street trees? I mean, they're not that expensive.
We could.
It's a couple $100 for an 1.5 inch tree. It's not thousands of dollars.
I think a little bit of our thought process is we're increasing costs for them to make them go through and not just roll in sod and rock. And so that was just one way where we could shave a little, but
But we're requiring 1 tree per property?
Yeah, we require none right now. so.
yeah. But
Yeah,
we're
so I think we
we're
could,
saying a minimum of 1 in the front yard.
Yeah, I think 1 in the front yard could be 1.5 inches without breaking the bank.
I don't disagree.
All right with everyone?
Yep.
All right.
I'd accidentally mow that twig.
I would too.
Okay,
we
other
can
suburban
make that
questions, otherwise we'll move on to urban. Let's move on to urban. Trustee Stevens.
Here's where most of, I apologize in advance, so I don't have to do it again. Urban houses required access only from an alley. This, what's listed here makes it look like, and correct me if I'm wrong, that we're encouraging only alley access for urban houses.
Yes, you either alley, rear, or you can do the, like kind of what I was talking about, where you have the detached garage behind the house and you have just a one single driveway.
So where does
So one of the
street
three-
access come into play?
Well, street access would be on the rear for all
So
of the
there's n-
one option.
There's no street? Are we talking about like what we approved?
No,
farm.
no, like in there, the front part of that, like the first page, it shows the typical street section, so it'd be the same as like Fickle
Well,
Farm.
and that's what I'm saying,
Or
all,
Mary's, it'd be like Mary's Farm, it'd be like your house.
yeah.
What we're saying is that the
Street
driveway,
access,
the
car.
driveway has to
Yeah.
come off the alley,
Yeah.
or it has to be a single lane drive that goes down the side of the house to a garage set back at the back of the property.
But what I'm saying here is this looks like it's encouraging more of what we just approved for, Fickle
Are
Farm.
you talking about like
Yes, it is,
where
it's requiring that, so it says vehicle access, that's the goal in the garage, so they
Okay.
have to be in the back.
But I think what Lonnie's talking about is more of the courtyard style housing where they front
Oh,
come.
yeah.
And that's not what we're saying.
Okay,
Oh, so, yeah.
That's not what this code requires, but I can see how you might see that, but that's not.
okay.
Alley loaded can still have a street, just like Mary's Farm.
Yeah.
It can still have a street,
Of
but
course.
is it encouraged to still have a street?
Yeah, you can
Absolutely.
do either
Yeah.
one. It would be easier if you didn't wanna do a street to do a garden house, but, you know, that's
Okay.
pretty
But
specific.
those aren't all marketable either,
Yeah.
and so developers are gonna wanna do alley access homes, but with a street in front, just like Mary's Farm.
Yeah, well, and the only reason I bring this up is because I would like to see how the houses, the homes in Fickle Farm, the new Fickle Farm turn out, because we're having issues with people and snow removal and that type of stuff, and if we have a lot of these that do not have street access, I'm afraid we'll have more issues with that. I know I'm getting in the weeds and a little
Well,
deeper than that.
I think that might only be for the garden court houses that would be the case, but, the ones I've seen usually come off of like a main street, not an alley,
Okay,
typically.
I mean,
Because
that's,
it would make sense for them, because you're orienting, if you go to your packet, you can see an orientation of a garden home.
I saw
Or a
them all,
common
yeah.
garden, so it wouldn't make a lot of sense from an infrastructure perspective to build an alley along that. It would be your border would be a road, most likely.
Yeah, okay,
And I
I
think,
wanna make sure we're not encouraging that.
no, we're encouraging traditional neighborhood development like Mary's Farm.
Yeah.
Okay. I
In
like
the,
that.
in the general urban area.
And like you just said, all of your diagrams depict that, you know, just a typical old style neighborhood, and that's what I like as well, but the wording kind of looks like it's encouraging. You know, there's no encouragement for a front, a road, a street at all.
But again, it's not that the road is discouraged, it's that the
Yeah,
access
it's just
to the
the-
lot has to be from the alley for your
Okay.
vehicle, right?
I like it.
So that's
Um,
the only distinction.
Back on lots and blocks, we have all these red things scratched off, driveways, access to local streets from blah, blah, blah. Anyway, I'm gonna summarize that, and this is page 28 of the packet. Do all these changes reflect, do they still adhere to Lucas standards?
So the reason those changes were made is that, the access, all of those road standards were in a different section. And we removed all those and just said Lucas standards, but we missed these lot and block standards, where
Okay.
the Lucas standards is slightly different than this, so we wanted to make sure that goes away.
They're slightly different, so we're still adhering to Lucas.
We're still, yes, so we're getting rid of this because it conflicts with Lucas. Does that make sense?
That does, and that's.
And we also, from the last meeting, we also discovered that when we adopted Lucas, it's just the general Lucas standard, so we could use either one. We did not specify Loveland, we've just been using Loveland as a practice. So we could use the Fort Collins standard if we.
But
if we
didn't,
so-
that's right, we did talk about
You
that.
did talk about that, so that's good news, the way it's adopted, it wouldn't require us to change the ordinance, right, or we would have done it on this meeting, so.
And I think actually the benefit is that gives us the flexibility based on the development type. If the Fort Collins standard or the Loveland standard within the Lucas guidelines or the Lucas requirements is more advantageous for that development, we can rely on either now,
Okay,
so.
And the benefit of this too is, they update those, they have a team of engineers and developers that go through it, it's usually like a multi-year process. We're just, once this is adopted by reference, once they adopt it, once they update it, it's updated for us too. So we don't have to keep it,
to
taking it to
reinvent
the
the
board.
wheel.
Yeah, so,
On page 32 of the packet, down here it says alley loaded homes with less than 1,200 square feet are required own one parking space per dwelling unit.
Oh, you're talking about the parking standard in the regular, okay.
Required parking, yes.
Sure.
I'm kind of bouncing around now, I kind of went.
That's all right, you keep us on our you keep me on my toes, that's for sure.
That 1,200 square feet, is that include a structure with an unfinished basement? Or is it 1,200 total feet, 1,250 total feet? Or 1,250 finished living space?
Let me go to that, but I'm assuming it's just the. I don't know how to order on my paper packet here. So this was really kind of done because of the practical nature of all of the cottages that we've had constructed and birthed over the, that it's actually works. It's been working pretty well. And so we just wanted to, okay, here we go.
I think he said page 32, so you're on
32 of the packet.
here.
I think that's it, isn't it?
That's it.
Yes. Okay, alley loaded homes with less than a floor area, so I would, that's livable floor area, that's, usable floor area, and that's consistent, that number, with our water dedication ordinance and with the reduction in impact fees.
I'm just saying,
So
if
it
there's
all matches, right?
If there's an unfinished basement, that house could end up being 2,500 square feet.
Will be unfinished, so we're just saying livable area.
Because for future upgrade, one parking space may not be enough. It's just a nitpick, it's a little thing, but I can see where parking could become an issue.
I mean, it could, I mean, if we could put, we could put finished or livable, but yeah, I mean, we could just add that as a slight amendment, and then hopefully, since we're all connected now, I think no matter what, I think we'll be able to connect, we have a zoning review now on every building, which we didn't have a few years ago. So we'll be able to catch that if someone remodels the basement.
Okay.
Of course, people do that without permits, and if they do it without a permit, then that's just, so be it.
Yep.
That's
Okay.
just the risk we take.
And again,
Could you zoom in
I'm
on
just,
that?
oh, go ahead.
We can all see your screen and it's helpful because we're all looking at the same thing, but.
I had
could you-
no idea.
Could you zoom in? We can see it
No,
on
good.
our desktop.
Good thing I wasn't looking at sports scores or something. So, how do I
That
zoom
plus
in?
sign right there, you could,
And
just,
like we talked
Where
about,
is
I'm just pointing out little
Oh.
things that I skimmed through and caught.
Oh, there it is. I'm sorry.
just since we can all see it, I could see everybody was trying to, there you go. Now we can actually see it on our screen a lot easier. Thank you.
And just,
Can the audience see that? Does the
They can't-
audience
they
see what
can
we
now.
They see what we see?
They can now. They were watching the video before.
so, I mean, if there's a capability of more living space, that one parking space per unit.
I think that's an extremely good catch, Lonnie. I would not have thought about that, but we can just add like livable area, and then I'll tell all of my staff, the building staff, that hey, once this gets passed, if someone's going to remodel their basement, finish their basement, they're going to need to expand their garage or add another pad for another space.
I think we actually ought to just change, I'll just suggest that we change it, that it has to be 1,250 square feet of finished and unfinished
Okay.
Yes.
floor area, because that way,
Finished.
Okay, then it's just done.
yeah, I mean, like David Gregg's cottages don't have, basements,
Yeah,
and
they
so,
have crawl
that's
space.
easy.
So,
And I know that we talked about, some of the bigger lots, you're gonna have two spaces automatically in back already, so.
Yep.
But I could see an issue, possible issue. Okay, and then on page 44 of the packet, we're talking about subdivision identity and place standards. And we talked about all of the things that need to be in place. I'm kind of going by memory here as far as like parks and and open space and all this other stuff. And this is the end of it. And it's kind of just a question, a little off topic, but we always have a cash in lieu of for some of those standards. And why do we have a cash in lieu of? It doesn't say cash in lieu of on here.
We don't have a cash in lieu for any of those standards.
We don't?
We don't.
We don't? Okay, then.
No, we
That
used to
question-
do cash in lieu for park area, but once when we amended the standards with this board two years ago, about, yes, 2 years ago now, that was removed. So it's now required.
You have to
can't
build
pay it
parkland,
off.
you
Okay,
can't do cash
Perfect,
flow.
all right. Then this one was just, had the lot sizes and, you know, how wide the face of them, so anyway, forget about that. On page 57, we have planned unit, or PUD overlay district. My question on that is every time a PUD comes up lately, or in the last couple of years, it seems to be an issue. Why are we still doing PUDs?
Well, that's not a change, it's just the reason that's labeled with the R is because we had to because the zoning districts went into the existing zoning districts, so it had to be essentially lettered or renumbered, all of those districts. Does that make sense? Because this is an overlay district, that's the important thing, so we still would allow an overlay district. So let's say if you decided to develop a property, Lonnie, and one of the current zoning districts either didn't have a use or didn't have like maybe you couldn't meet its standards, whatever, this is kind of like the ability that you could still do the overlay on top of it to have your own specific standards. So that's what it's intended to do. And also the last section is basically the relationship of old PUDs to the current development process. So it's basically saying that we're using, you know, the preliminary final essentially process instead of the old 2006 process, just so everybody understands how that works.
But
I mean, we're effectively doing the same thing, it's just.
Okay, but number 4 says you can amend it at any time for any amount.
Sure, I mean.
So, I mean, what's it good for?
Well, we can't, so when we started this conversation, we talked about how we didn't want to change the whole town because we probably have some legal challenges to a
Okay.
different zoning district. So we have many existing
Okay,
PUDs, not that many anymore, but, you know, a lot of that I-25 property, all those yellow, those were all PUDs that were approved
Okay.
with almost no uses, but they have to be able to, they've got a district.
And we have to
They have
deal
to
with
be
that.
able to amend the district, like Fickle Farm amended their district this year, right? And you didn't have a problem with it because, you know, everybody liked their plan, but they had to do some amendments to the density of what was approved. So we have to give them the ability to do that because we have existing PUD.
That does make sense.
And the other is, you know, the overlay is a relief valve. So, you know, if one of these districts just doesn't work and maybe somebody wants to do something really cool, something really unique. And, you know, we have to do something that's, you know, really specific to that. And you would be creating that overlay just on that property as a PUD overlay. So far, no one's done that, but it's there just in case someone wants to do something, you know, really cool, so.
And the
That's
PUD
how I-
process, including amendments, comes in front of the board.
Yes.
So even though it sounds like it's imminently flexible, it's really not, because they have to get approval from the board to do that.
You gotta approve everything, so you know, and it goes to planning commission too, it's the same as a rezoning, but with more things to it. So for like commercial, you're approving their site plan, you know, like that comes to you, right, so.
Okay, the last question I have then is, speaking of rezoning, I know that the Farmstead, last section of it on the east side of County Line Road has not been rezoned yet.
It is not.
So will all this apply to them when they come and ask for rezoning again?
Well, originally, we actually talked about maybe conditioning this on them getting the new zoning districts, but when they went a little faster than the Edwardses usually do, from my experience, you know, we were okay with them doing the western section just because, you know, we couldn't really restrict them. We had no code to tell them to apply to, but he's agreed that the eastern section and what we're proposing would meet his plan.
Oh, perfect.
I mean, you know, he's doing a very new urbanist style development anyway, with a mixture of urban and suburban and commercial, and, he's already doing that. So, this code is in a lot of ways trying to codify that for new developments in the future, a similar type of product, so.
Okay.
Now,
So,
whether he sells it or not, I don't know, because there's a lot of infrastructure that'll be required,
so he may not have to adhere to this, but he's naturally going to.
Well, if you decide as, from a policy standpoint, we're creating these new districts. You've got all your existing districts. Our recommendation is if someone rezones in the future, it matches the comp plan in these new districts. But you could, a developer could make the case, I wanna go R4 here, I wanna go to R1 here. And that's up to the board and the planning commission at the time to decide. But, our recommendation moving forward is that you use the new districts.
Okay.
Can't require it, but it's a strong recommendation.
So when you
Based
have,
on the comp.
when you have the R1, this page here, this is actually old news, or will be?
No, the R1, all that stays the same.
Okay.
It's all still there, it's not going anywhere.
Alright,
So
okay.
there's that flexibility, let's say this just doesn't work or it needs a lot of changes, those districts still exist.
But from our perspective, the comp plan for properties that are not currently annexed or zoned, the comp plan suggests a certain development type, right? A place type that we've talked about. And so if it suggests an area as general urban residential, then I think that a developer who wanted to come in and annex and rezone would have to make a pretty good case to you why it shouldn't be zoned urban residential, like the comp plan identifies. They could come in and request an R3 zoning, that's still in the code, and they could come in and make that request. I think our recommendation would be that that they would have to zone into the new districts unless they made a really compelling case as to why that did not work or shouldn't work. But they're still in the code and they could still request that traditional zoning designation. But the comp plan identifies all these new areas as being zoned and developed in the future under these new zoning districts. So and when you make a zoning decision, a really good way to do that is to say, well, what does our future land use plan suggest, right? And that provides you the context for saying, well, our future land use plan suggests this is urban residential, and so you should rezone as urban residential, right? That was the intent of the comp plan. It's not set in stone, but that's what the comp plan is for, is to help guide future annexation and zoning decisions.
We'll revisit the comp plan and, none of this, I guess the easy way to say, Jeff, I think especially understands this, like there's numerous PUDs that had vesting over that's what's mostly been developed recently. So, you're once when it gets approved, we're kind of stuck with it, right? But we're saying that, if we're gonna approve anything new in town, this is the vision that we want here on out.
No, I understand. You kind of alluded to that this is gonna supersede our designations and so,
No, it's not superseding, it's going, the goal is we're hoping that future boards and staffs, follow the new comp plan, and when that's updated, that, maybe they do a little better job with it. That's our hope, that's how we're going to recommend to a developer, hey, you need to go urban residential this section. We're not gonna say you should go R4. We're hoping that you agree with that, but you could all change and you could say, hey, I don't care, maybe it should just be R1. So that is still there. Anybody can develop in it, and all the existing homes, it stays whatever their zoning district is.
Okay,
I have
thank you, Kurt.
Sure.
I don't have any.
So that is something that you started with right at the beginning, piggybacks on that. So your recommendation to the board is to only apply these new standards to non-annexed developments.
Non-annexed and, any infill or already annexed development, like I said, we have some properties that, hey, someone wants to maximize the potential, or it's on a good, and they have to rezone. So anything that needs to rezone from its current district or annex into town. That's
So-
what we'd recommend.
There are some that already, like, for example, what I might like to see instead, or in addition, or as an adjunct, is if a development that is already annexed into the town, but they haven't done anything with it, and there's no neighborhood master plan yet. So kind of,
I don't think there are any of those.
No, there is not.
The only one might be Turion, but they have an approved PUD, which is basically a neighborhood master plan. So they,
well, I was thinking Ludlow.
Ludlow has an approved PUD as well.
Okay.
So they already have basically a zoning, they already have zoning designations.
And once we have a vested right, then I think we're in questionable territory if we take it back. That's why we're.
Now, if they wanted to come in and modify that plan
Right,
and rezone in order to do that, which a number of PUDs, old PUDs did come in and ask for straight zoning
right.
or traditional zoning, then you would expect them to zone into these new zones, right? So if they came in and asked for rezoning,
Right,
we would do that. If they didn't, they could develop under their current PUD without having to ask for a rezone.
so if they developed under their current PUD without asking for a rezoning, would they have to do four-sided architecture?
So the way the PUDs work, I'll just try to be really brief. If it wasn't stated in the PUD, then it always falls back on the underlying regulation. So like Prairie Star, if you remember, had all of the design, they had design requirements, they had parking requirements, so they followed their own, which aren't very good, to be honest with you. Because they were approved in their PUD, like before any of you actually, like in 2013, they approved like everything, like, right? But if they don't do that, then they have to follow. Now, the design guidelines, we believe, they'd still have to meet the design guidelines.
But I think, like Ludlow is an example, they do not have architectural requirements as part of their PUD. So they would have to follow our existing regulation.
Got it. When they put it in, they
If it's
didn't.
in their PUD, they get to follow
they get
their
to
own
do
rules
it.
that were approved. If
Okay,
it's
but
not,
if
they
it's
have to fall
not,
back on
they
our
have to
rules.
come back to us.
And the only one that I know that has those specific requirements, other than Prairie Star, which is pretty much built out, is Turion or Wilson Ranch. They have like a 230 page book of requirements that are archaic, right? They're designed from
They're horrible.
1997
Oh,
or something,
okay.
like 1999. They were approved in 2000 or 2001, but
Okay.
I don't think they'll follow that, but they have the right to that. If they want to go and they want to build a 1990 like 8 DR Horton subdivision, they could do it right now. So
Because they already
Anyway.
put it through,
Maybe.
it's already been approved, that's that.
it's already been approved. I mean, they still have to come with you for a lot of things. I think you can
Right.
strongly recommend, this
We
does
have
not
some
make,
more tools
let's
in
make
the
some
toolbox.
changes to this.
Okay.
But,
They won't be, I can already tell you, they've spent an enormous amount of time and money over the last 4 years coming up with completely new plans. So that
Okay.
I don't think they have any intention of building the old PUDs,
And so
not in its exact form.
my last question or example is Vantage, where they have the western half of all those properties. And we got some concessions from them, thank you very much for doing the four-sided architecture on the ones that face the road. But there's that, I don't know if they own it or if it's still privately owned, the whole strip of land directly to the east of it, but before the tree streets and such.
you mean like I guess it would be like the third and fourth filing of Vantage?
Yeah, I think that-
All the western half of Vantage.
So
Vantage
that-
was a PUD, although it didn't get approved, it had a long history, very long history. But it was approved with straight zoning, so the new design guidelines, we've already rejected their new house designs last
Thank
week
you.
with the
Okay.
new design guidelines, but yeah, they know that they have to meet the new design guidelines,
Okay.
which is four-sided architecture,
And
Thank
they,
you.
so.
their zoning isn't gonna change,
Right,
but they're already completely platted as well. I mean, they platted that entire development record.
Yeah, it's final plat, it even has a
It's final platted, it's
development
all
agreement
zoned,
that
but they don't have their own architectural requirements. They will be following ours for future phases.
got it. Excellent, okay, thank you, that answers all my questions.
Okay, any other urban questions?
One.
Go ahead.
So, in the urban section, I don't remember the page, but it said, bike lanes and street parking are both encouraged. If you've been to Fort Collins, you kind of know that you get one or the other unless the town has made a very distinct delineation between the two. Because a lot of people will park in those bike lanes and that's just kind of life. Is that something that we're okay moving forward with? Having either parking in the street or a bike lane, or can we actually put a bike lane in?
The Lucas standards don't allow that anymore, so the areas you're probably referencing were prior to. But the Lucas standards require, for all except for like local residential streets, like in a neighborhood, they don't require dedicated on-street bike lanes, but basically every other street classification requires dedicated on-street bike lanes.
Okay.
So like, as an example, maybe in Heritage Ridge, right, Fifth Street absolutely requires bike lanes, but you know, a cul-de-sac does not.
Right.
So the local residential streets don't, any other classification in Lucas does.
Okay. I guess
Separate from parking.
right. I guess the reason I bring it up is because being zoned urban, obviously land is not exactly coming out of everywhere. You have to be very, very specific because changing any of that moving forward gets incredibly expensive. So I guess when it comes to developing urban, are we going to be encouraging dedicated bike lanes as per what you were talking about?
It's a requirement.
Yeah.
We're not encouraging it, it's required.
So the street parking then, because it is on that, it was saying street parking is allowed, but is it kind of like at Mary's Farm, I guess? Where street parking is allowed up front? Or?
Is it the bike lanes would be outside of the parking, right? So you
Correct.
park and then on the other side, right? Do we have?
Oh, okay. I see.
I don't know
So
where we have an
one-
example of that.
So one side of the street's bike lane, the other side is street parking.
Yeah, so again, unless it's in like a local residential neighborhood street, it requires dedicated on-street parking and a separate bike lane adjacent to that parking and then the travel lane.
Okay. Okay, yeah, I just wanted to make sure
Yeah.
that people weren't parking on the bike lane, cause
Yep.
there's lots of active bikers here and we would not ever stop here.
We will not include combination parking and bike lanes except maybe in rural areas, where that's a little different.
Okay.
And those would be wider than a traditional parking lane that might only be 7 or 8 feet.
Other urban questions? Okay, is that it? Do we have like a minor revision section or something? That counts. Great, thank
I don't
you.
think you have to take action, but
We're gonna open up to the public, just real quick to see if anyone in the audience would like to speak to this.
Kurt?
Okay, seeing none, bring it back to the board. Yeah, this is just a reading, right?
It's just an
If
introduction,
you have
so
anything in the
we'll-
meantime, we can email you or what?
Yeah, absolutely, and if you have questions, when we come back to you, we'll make sure that we outline all the questions. If you get questions or comments to us, we'll bring those back in the meeting, we'll talk about what those were and what changes we made. And then we'll also, if we make any, and then we'll also address the issues we've discussed tonight and try to come up with some better code language based on the discussion we heard.
Actually, sorry, real quick, before I forgot, I wrote down here, high quality materials, what we talked about a month ago, with what does a high quality material constitute? Is that gonna be built into this, or is that its own discussion?
It's already in the architectural guidelines,
Okay.
so it doesn't need to be in here.
Cool, there we go.
Awesome. Okay, we'll just move on to reports then, we'll start out with staff.
On the dais tonight, we printed some, updates for you. These are similar in nature to what we've been doing via email and, I've mentioned to you before, our staff put together monthly reports for us, about some of just the highlights and things they've been working on. We've been forwarding those to you via email. Now we've combined them into just a consistent format, so it's easy to flip through, bullets. They're on our website as well. And so I just wanted to share those with you, and we'll just stick them in your packets, the second meeting of each month in the future. And then they'll again be available on our website as well. Let's see, quick update. I had a request actually from Mr. Larson to give an update on roundabout project. The work at the roundabout is proceeding pretty smoothly, all things considered. Traffic is delayed, but overall has not been a significant problem. And the contractor's been able to maintain their schedule because of the the traffic control measures that were put in place. So we still expect to be done with that project, excluding the planting, which will have to wait until spring. But we'll be done with all the hardscape work by December 14th, it looks like, barring some issue that we haven't foreseen yet, but we're still on schedule to be done by December 14th. The I-25 interchange, it's supposed to be opening this week. I went out there today and it's not open, but it is supposed to be open
It's
before
looking good.
Thanksgiving. What was that?
It's looking good.
It is looking great. It is very far along. I don't have a whole lot of information about that project other than what CDOT's already said publicly. They sent out a press release last week kind of congratulating their contractor for maintaining the schedule. And with the expectation the interchange will be open by Thanksgiving again, so I assume tomorrow. When I went by today, it looked like it was relatively complete and they were cleaning up at least all the asphalt and concrete work that was necessary to get that interchange back open. They still have a lot of work to do out there and that will continue on for actually all the way into 2024. But you should be able to go northbound and southbound on the freeway from Berthoud or to Berthoud starting tomorrow, I hope. The Trail Gap project on South Berthoud Parkway, south of Welch, is moving along really well as well. If you haven't been by there, they've already run curb and gutter all the way from Welch down to Spartan and done just some temporary asphalt patchwork. They'll obviously they'll come back in and do a finished patch job between the existing asphalt surface and the curb and gutter. They've already built the trail from Welch down to kind of where the existing homes, the fences jut out a little bit farther. We've got to work around those. We had to move some utilities in order to do that. But they're already making really good progress and they're still on schedule to have all that work done by December. I think their end date is the same actually, December 14th. I hope I'm not quoting that wrong, but I believe it's the same. As staff, we met together today to review our draft of our pavement condition index survey. We've talked about that PCI survey a few times. And that will inform our 5-year plan to spend $1 million a year on asphalt maintenance. So we should have that done before the budget discussions we'll have on December 14th. And hopefully the adoption of next year's fiscal budget on December 14th, but we'll be able to share with you what we think the plan is for year 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5 by that date. So that'll give you some good context about where we intend to spend that $1 million a year. We are planning to have a study session on December 7th. So that study session, work session will cover 2 topics primarily. The first will be kind of a Metro District refresher because there's a big Metro District service plan coming to you in the future. And so we wanted to remind you about kind of what are Metro Districts, how do they work, why do they exist, and what are the things we've talked about in the past that you've expressed a desire for us to review in the context of our service plan submittal review process. So just to kind of get everybody primed so that when that service plan does come to you, we'll have some good context and background about how all that works, especially for the newer trustees who haven't been through that really. And then we'll also that night be talking about our raw water policy, our raw water delegation policy, what our plans are for the raw water money we've collected, where we see the future, an update on our raw water master plan. So you guys saw that raw water master plan, right? That was a long-term plan. We've taken that and said, okay, that's great, but what does the next 5 years actually look like? So we have some better information about what we think the next 5 years should look like, and then we will be discussing possible changes to our dedication policies and fees at that meeting as well. We won't be asking you to make that decision that night, but to start that conversation, hopefully we can finish early after the first of the year. Just for a little bit of information, I was looking at our sales tax report yesterday. The most recent sales tax data we have is from September, but we've basically collected as much sales tax through September of this year as we did all of last year. So just each year our sales tax numbers continue to grow significantly. That's driven a lot by population increase, right? There's just more people spending money that live in town, but it's also driven by online sales and a host of other things. So Sales tax isn't necessarily an indicator of economic health, but declining sales tax certainly is a bad indicator. Growing sales tax is usually a pretty good indicator that your economy is moving along locally. So we would expect to finish the year, assuming there's not some massive change between now and the end of the year, and even if there is, we'll still end up much higher than last year, but probably somewhere in the 20% increase range year over year between last year and this year. And that's consistent pretty much with every year for the last 4 years. So that's good news, and that just means more money to invest in streets and parks and trails and all the other stuff that we do. And that's it. That's everything I had on my list. If you have any questions, I'm happy to answer them.
All right, Attorney Smith, anything?
Only to add on to what Chris was mentioning about the work session on December 7th. I've invited my, and Chris has invited my partner Charles Norton to make that presentation, so Charles will be here that night. And then, other than that, I wish you all a very happy and safe Thanksgiving.
Thank you, you
Awesome,
too.
thank you. Trustee Sorcelli.
Nothing to report. I just feel a need to acknowledge staff for how much you guys do every day. It's just, it doesn't get past my notice how much you guys are doing, all the moving parts. Just thank you for what you do. I'm very grateful.
Thank you.
And I think Trustee Grace has a really great suggestion for keeping us caffeinated during meetings. So I'll just pass the baton on to him.
So, yeah, no, okay, so it's the Keurig that's in the kitchen back there?
Yeah.
Like the 8:30 stretch where we have to take a break, like
Yeah.
we can just go get that thing kicking and,
Heck yeah.
get like 5 or 6 beverages laid out for everybody so we can, really dig into the meat and potatoes that Kurt brings in front of us.
That's why I had to take a break.
We
Yeah,
need it.
exactly.
We need a
Fully
barista.
support this idea.
Yes, yeah, I think it's
There's a
absolutely.
bunch of Keurig cups back there and you're welcome to them, so.
Well, it's
Hallelujah.
awkward to get up in the middle of a meeting, and,
So coffee
Here.
break time,
yeah,
please.
like
maybe.
8 o'clock or so. But
Okay.
we usually have a break
So
around
put it in
then.
the calendar.
Yeah, exactly. No real report, just wanted to, I guess, steal everybody else's thunder. The rec center opening was amazing. The commemorative coins were great. Everything about it was so awesome. I know you made a mention in the email. The fact that that parking lot was jam-packed pretty much all day until it was shutting down, it is really kind of indicative of how big this is for our town. It was amazing. Every single part of it was great. I know that it's ongoing and evolution-wise, learning new lessons that you thought you had got the first time, but you have to learn it again. Everybody I interacted with, staff-wise, was incredibly kind, patient, and professional. Amanda, I came in early that morning for grand opening and then came back later around 7 to go do some open swimming, and she was still there. Like, so did you go home and nap? And she said, no,
She
I
did
just
not.
planned for it. Like, that's insane. So just wanted to really praise staff for all the work they do, especially getting that up and running and on time, and it looks great.
Thank you. And I will say, I went by there yesterday and today, and it was just as busy yesterday and today as it was on the grand opening day. It's really incredible to see. Today at about 2:30, I drove by the playground, and I didn't count everybody. I stopped when I got to about 45. And so, out on the playground, there was probably, if I had to guess, 60 to 80 people. Kids, adults, grandmas and grandpas, you name it, seniors, whoever. It was a huge mass of people out at the playground. The aquatics facility has been packed. In the gym, I counted 32 people in the gymnasium shooting hoops, and it looked like just open gym kind of pickup basketball, which is really cool. It's just people going in there and recreating together. So there's definitely a lot of excitement, and it's getting a ton of use, so it's really cool to see.
Trustee Hyman.
I would echo everything that Mike just said, and it was phenomenal. And I actually went over there on Sunday morning because somebody picked up my coat that I left on the hay bale.
Yeah, that was us. We saw a coat there, we turned it into lost and found.
Well, that was so nice of you, because then I couldn't find it, but that's okay. They called me, they found it, and I had left my card saying my coat was missing. But anyway, I went back Sunday morning, and there was a line basically to the door. There was like 4 people filling out applications at the counter and signing up for memberships. And then I just walked through to see how busy it was. All but one of the treadmills was in use. Almost every weight machine was in use. Yeah, the pool had people in it, people were shooting baskets in the gym, and yeah, it was so great to see the tours and see all the facilities, but to see people and kids out there really enjoying it was just, yeah, incredibly gratifying. And also what Mike said, every staff person that I've encountered out there has been really competent and really helpful and very friendly. And, you know, like I said, there was like 15 people in line on Sunday morning at 11:20, and they were really efficient. So yeah, just incredible, great work, and can't wait. I had to sort of keep a few people off the skate park, but I told them it would be open soon.
The skate park is drawing a lot of excitement. And we need to get it open because we've caught a few kids trying to skate in the gym, which is not okay. So.
It's not open.
It is not technically open. And
I walked by there
and
like
it's
2
packed with
weekends ago,
kids.
it's packed, that was great, why do we have it closed?
Cause it's not finished, the landscape's not done, they're actually, so today there was like 12 kids out skating on the skate park, and there's a giant hole behind the ramp where we've got construction employees, and I'll be honest, we quit trying to run them off, because every time we did, more showed up. So, the concrete is safe, it's complete, but the area around it is not, and so, you know, it's been a little bit of a challenge, but they're so excited about it, and like I said, there were about 30 out one day, and our construction manager went and said, hey guys, you gotta go, in about 15 minutes, I'm gonna call the cops if you're not out here. This is, you know, we got guys actively working here, it's not safe. And he said within about 15 minutes, 20 more showed up, and there was almost 50 kids there, so it's not fully open, it should be very soon, but like I said, you know, it's almost gotten to the place where it's not worth trying to keep them off the concrete. The concrete's done, so.
Can we just put a sign up? I mean, maybe you did already, that just says.
We have 7 signs up that say this is not open. and
We
this is
should
an
just
active
say use at your own
construction
risk, then we're covered.
I would just say cover,
Is that-
yeah.
zone. Yeah.
And maybe one of those
I
snow
don't know.
fences, you know, the orange ski fences at
We
the end
keep
to
trying,
catch
we keep
anybody.
trying to run them off, it's just not working.
Well, just real quick, the skaters I talked to said that they were super excited because all of the skate parks in northern Colorado have been built by the same 2 companies, and they have a lot of similarity in features. And they were looking at ours and they said, this is different and we can't wait to try it, and it looks like it's gonna flow really, really well, so. And, anyway, so just, yeah, great day for birth.
And I had 2 more really quick things, only just because I think these are fun. One, I've been told the high, where we're at now is we're over 600 memberships already.
Wow.
Really exciting, because we planned for 430. And then on the first full day of operation in the pool, by the end of the day, there'd been the slide timer, I don't know if you remember the slide timer, which I knew would be kind of fun. I didn't realize watching people go down and check their times and then, like, you know, razzing their friends about who got the fastest time and going over and over and over again, trying to go faster, has been really fun to watch. But there were almost 2,000 individual slide runs on the first day. So, because it counts, right? So like when you come down to the bottom, it tells you your time, then it says you were, you know, number 9 out of 1,860 today. And so, anyway, on day 1, there was, I was there at 7:30 and there was over 1,800 slide runs on Saturday at 7:30. So anyway, just thought that was kind of a fun.
7.5 second record, by the way.
7.5, I cannot get below 8 seconds, I just want to say. I've tried many, many times already.
I did 9.2 seconds and I thought it was fast, and then I saw no.
If you can get sub 8 seconds, you're flying. So.
I just had one other thing, port meeting's next Wednesday, and we had promised them a budget update on the parks budget for next year. So I talked to Keith about that today, and just if you can get those slides so that he can give everybody an overview, or I don't know, Amanda, whoever, but somebody.
I'll connect with Pete, or with Keith.
Cool.
All right, Trustee Stevens.
Just a couple things. If you guys, anybody has an opportunity to go by Agile Systems, they're on First. I work right behind it. I open up the door, I watch the progress. That's a phenomenal, it's gonna be a phenomenal business, and they put the blacktop in yesterday, that stunk. But it's a pretty neat building, and watching it go up, I just kind of look at it as you drive by. It's pretty impressive. Is there an update for as far as a sign at Bertha Reservoir?
That was actually on my list, yes. We approved the proof for that sign a couple weeks ago. It should be installed like any day. I mean,
Okay.
It's been quite the ordeal, but yes.
Kind of like the lift
Should be
station?
done. I would actually say this is probably more frustrating to me than the lift station.
Okay, and then, there was a comment or a question from a citizen as far as snow removal at Prairie Star. I think probably everybody got that, but, I know when we looked at the snow removal plan, that there was gonna be some updates and changes specifically to Prairie Star.
Yep.
Have we seen that, or when will we see that?
The discussion we had was that we were gonna make those changes. It wasn't gonna come back to you, but we were gonna add the loops through Prairie Star and a couple other things, which
Okay.
we've done, so.
But there's still like a level 2 or whatever, 3, is that what we decided?
No, that didn't really change, so, I mean, in terms of, the
Priority?
level 2 and level 3, the priority is based on the scale of the storm, right? So,
Okay,
in a lower tier snowstorm where there's only a handful of inches, we will only plow priority 1 streets.
okay,
You know, in a bigger event, we'll get to priority 2 streets, cause in those smaller events, most of the time the snow's gone by the next day on the roads anyways. And the bigger events, we'll do priority 2, and then the really heavy events, we'll do priority 3, but we won't get to neighborhood streets for several days after a major storm. It's just not gonna happen. And I think we talked a lot about that, right? There's just the timing of being able to get out and plow like somebody's local neighborhood street is really, in a lot of instances, especially with cul-de-sacs, that can be really challenging. And so it will take days to get to those lower priority streets in an 18-inch snow event like we had last year. And that was true this past year, and that will be true next year. And so, and that's true everywhere. I mean, I have several employees that live in Loveland and Fort Collins that couldn't get out of the neighborhood for 2 weeks after that storm. It's not unique to Berthoud. And I understand the sentiment that was expressed in the email, and we would love to be able to plow everybody's street so that everybody could get out of their house after every major event. It's just not realistic.
well, and equipment as well, I mean, the availability of equipment's definitely.
Absolutely.
Yeah, and I understand, I just wanted to make sure we had that update was on its way.
But we did add that backbone loop through Prairie Star and our priority 1 streets.
Okay, thank you, Chris. Then I got a couple things on the rec center. First, I heard that Jeff was paying $5 for anybody that stand in line, so. Okay, no, I'm just kidding, I want my $5 later though. Okay. And it's not a big deal, but somebody asked what my size was for a rec center t-shirt, and I didn't get one. I want my t-shirt.
Amanda has we did have some Town of Berthoud shirts made for you, and she ironed them all, and she just needs to know your size, so.
Okay, all right.
Amanda has them.
I was just looking forward to that, so anyway. Speaking of the capacity, I talked to Amanda about that. What is the capacity of the rec center, and when will we need Jeff to build another one?
Dear God. Long after I'm gone from here.
It's a good question, and the rec center is like any other, it's like a street, right? There are peak times of use where it will be full. And it's designed to be at capacity at those peak times of use, or near capacity, right? Because you don't want to build a bunch of empty space. But there's a whole lot of times of the day where it won't be. There's a ton of excitement right now, so it's getting heavily used. It's also a good time for it to be heavily used because it's the week of Thanksgiving, and you know, the local kids are out of school and all that stuff. So a huge number of the people in the rec center these last couple of days have been middle school and high school age kids, that have a place to go and shoot hoops and get in the pool and have fun with their friends. I don't know that we have an exact capacity number, like the pool, our general capacity is 150. Its actual like legal capacity is higher than that, but that's where we feel comfortable from a lifeguarding standpoint. And they're building occupancy capacity numbers, but what's practical, when it's at capacity, you might have to wait for a treadmill. But we wouldn't expect to be at that place on a regular basis for a long time,
Okay,
I guess is
all right.
the
I
easiest
guess
way to
it
say
could
it.
be a good problem if it does happen.
Yeah, I mean, if it's overflowing with people, we did design the facility to be expanded. The key areas of the facility, like the fitness center, like the gymnasium, and like the aquatics. So we have some space around the building to be able to expand those. So.
And that was one of my next questions.
Yeah.
So, and just a suggestion, entering the parking lot or entering into that intersection or that driveway is really dark at night. Is there any way we can get some?
The main entrance off of Berthoud Parkway.
Yes.
Yeah.
It's hard to see. It's dark enough. Can we get some dark sky compliant lights there?
Yeah, we can look at the lighting there. It probably needs some striping too.
Okay.
That will
Yeah,
help.
I think that would have helped.
That'll help make it really obvious where that entrance is.
And last of all, and I mentioned this to Chris earlier, there's some seniors that are concerned about the silver sneakers not being accepted or whatever, and it could be 1 to 3 years or whatever. And, there's cost concerns to specifically, several seniors. Is there, I was hoping we could do just a real quick brainstorm. Is there anything that we could help with as far as grants or subsidies or something that wouldn't isolate that segment of our population from using that amenity?
There's really only a couple of ways to handle it, in my opinion. We're bummed that we've been working on this silver sneakers deal for almost a year and they're not accepting us as a facility. We just don't have any control over that. And we get people are frustrated. We are going to be signing contracts for Optum Fitness and Renew Active. And those are similar to silver sneakers. They're not as widely available through your insurance company or as widely used because they're also newer programs. But those will be available, and so there will be seniors that will have access to those, we think. So that will help bridge a little bit of the gap. And the way Silver Sneakers works, right, if you're a member of Silver Sneakers, you go to the facility, we keep track, we send that to Silver Sneakers, and we get reimbursed. So Silver Sneakers is covering the cost of your admittance. That's all Silver Sneakers is, right? And that's typically funded through your health insurance program. So the only real solution is for us to cover their cost instead of their insurance company. And so either the town does it, it's done through a nonprofit who could do that in partnership with the town maybe somehow, but I don't know how we would make that work. Or that's really it. I mean, so we either eat the cost and give away the membership for free, which I don't think we would suggest, right? Or we can increase our scholarship program that's run, House Neighborly Services does income qualification for our recreation program. So if you wanna play basketball, you can't afford it, we don't wanna determine whether or not you can afford it, but House Neighborly Services is good at that because they connect people to all kinds of assistance programs. And so they do that income qualification for us and then provide that registration fee for that program. We haven't talked about doing that for memberships, but we could. We fund those scholarships, so we give House of Neighborly Services money to administer that program. So it's not House of Neighborly Services money that's paying for the scholarship, it's town money. They just do the income qualification for us and then basically pay us back our own money for
for whoever uses it. So
Would
we
anybody
increase
else
that
support
scholarship
looking
amount.
into that?
Totally, and there's some business owners too that approached me over the weekend about doing, well, they're big enough that they could, to do some promotional things to get the cost down for.
Well,
Yeah,
can
I
we
also think-
suggest that we have like a program for senior citizens where they have a discounted rate in general?
So the senior membership is less expensive already.
It's much
Where-
less.
Where I think where it has been an interesting question, and we've discussed whether or not this makes sense, and there, we don't have to debate it tonight, but we can if you want, is the senior couple membership, there's no such thing for us, so it's, you just pay for 2 senior memberships. Well, that works out to be almost as much as a family membership.
Yeah.
And so we've talked about what we maybe should do is create like a couples membership that's 1.5 times the single membership, rather than a full family membership cost, which is what you almost get to. You don't quite get there, but that's probably the only thing. I think that makes sense. We just need to kind of work through that. That's not really typical, so like we don't have a lot of good examples of how to do that, but
I would support that.
but I think
But
that
as a
would be
bridge,
a big.
as a bridge until senior Snickers or something. else.
Well,
I want
I
some
have,
senior Snickers.
I have 2 comments. I think all the people that are concerned about Silver Sneakers should contact Silver Sneakers, because we'd be happy to work with them, and we don't have control, and they should be accepting Berthoud.
No, but I gotta interject there, Jeff, because they've approached me on my Gmail, which I've had to forward to Chris. They have done this. Silver Sneakers says, we need to hear from the rec center. So we're getting 2 different things.
There's on the website.
Yeah.
If you go on the website and go to the recreation booklet, that's really cool website to go through. There is a link on there where you can go and it'll take you to Silver Sneakers and you can nominate Berthoud Rec Center as a Silver Sneakers location. The more people that do that go to the website, that click on the link, fill out the form and say, this is where we want Silver Sneakers. And that's part of their program, is to see how much interest is there
God,
really.
that's terrible. But that's not, so that email, I'll have to go back to that Gmail, I was going back and forth, but I got a different opinion from, they were saying, how can we help? And it's basically like the facility, Silver Sneakers is pushing back saying the facility has to get
Yes,
engaged. But-
that's what I'm hearing from
Silver
them.
Sneakers is wrong. I mean, cause what's happening is the people that are calling are getting different information from Silver Sneakers than what they're telling us. We've applied to the facility, we talk to them regularly, our staff is doing everything I think we can practically do. I just don't know what else we can do other than, a hostile takeover of Silver Sneakers. And I think part of the problem is that,
They're old, you could do it easy.
part of the problem is that there are other Silver Sneakers facilities within a reasonable drive time. Now, I know, like, if I said, well, if you're dead set on using the Silver Sneakers membership, Chilson is a Silver Sneakers facility, that's where all these folks were going before. And that, I wouldn't, when you tell someone that, they say, oh, great, you're telling me to go out of town. No, I'm not, I'm just saying that's what's available, and what Silver Sneakers is saying, I think, I have not personally talked to Silver Sneakers, but I think what they're saying is, look, you have a facility that's right here. And in fact, a lot of folks that live in Berthoud are closer to Chilson than people that live in Loveland in big areas of Loveland that are farther away from Chilson than we are. And so I think Silver Sneakers is just saying, we don't need another facility that close. I don't think that makes sense, and there's a whole lot of we can all agree that doesn't make sense. But I think that's part of what's driving the challenge. Now, there was a facility here that closed in town, and we thought that would quickly expedite the change, right? One facility closes, another one opens, and that hasn't happened, but.
Yeah, that's what Amanda said. So yeah, this is correct. Okay. Go in there, nominate. Amanda gave specific instructions to try to convince Tivity Healthcare. Okay. Well, there's a chain of everyone on there, so.
Yeah, so my other quick comment is, I did go in to get a family membership on Sunday morning for my wife and I. And for better or for worse, I do qualify for the senior discount. And the family membership was $760, and 2 individual senior memberships was $644. But $322 works out to be $27 a month, which is pretty darn reasonable for everything at that facility.
If you go 20 times a month, if you go 5 days a week, it's $1.35 a day. So it's not, I don't think it's prohibitively expensive. It absolutely could be for some folks, right? I'm not gonna pretend like there aren't people that,
Well, that'd be a good reason to do the
Can't spend
H and S
27
thing,
bucks.
That's
right?
what I was, yeah.
People that are income
Yeah.
qualified, we get some
to
sort of
me,
a
that seems like
subsidy.
an easy short-term solution.
Otherwise, you pay $27 a month and you get your money's worth.
And you don't have to pay yearly, you can pay monthly,
pay monthly.
and you're not strapped to a year contract too, so it's definitely doable for most people, but there are gonna be the few that I am speaking for. That's-
Yes, I hear you. Anything else?
I'm done.
All right. Mayor Pro Tem?
So to continue that discussion, looking at teens, I would make a request that the family membership not stop at 16, but rather go up to 19. So that the family membership covers, cause kids stay on your insurance until they're 26, which is maybe a little excessive. But to get a kid through high school and to have them be on the family membership, I think is.
Yeah, I agree wholeheartedly.
Okay,
I was under the impression that we fixed that already a long time ago, so if we haven't, I'm fully
It's-
supportive and we'll make that
okay.
change.
alright, yeah, cause right now it says 16.
It makes no sense to cap at 16.
Yeah, so and a lot of the high school kids are just like, oh my gosh, I can't afford that, there's no, how, it's too expensive, my family can't afford it.
No, I don't disagree.
Okay, cool. Alright, great, so, I like the capacity question. I hope we weren't a super spreader event over the weekend. I just don't know how all the Larimer County mask things work. Like, we have the great, ventilation system in the pool area, which to me seems like that's probably like a really great thing right now.
We also have a lot of chlorine in there, so.
I don't know if that kills the virus in the air though, it'll kill it in the water,
Good-
but
good
in the
question.
air. So I don't know, like, if there's any Larimer County guidance on,
We've spoken to Larimer County and,
Yeah.
and we have, I think, clear guidance from them, and that's what we're doing.
which is,
There's a mask mandate in place and we have signs up and we remind folks when they come in, they need to have a mask on. But we're also not putting our, part-time front desk staff in the enforcement role.
right,
And so if someone refuses, we're not forcing them to put one on or kicking them out of the facility, and that I think is consistent with the guidance we've gotten from the county.
okay. Yeah, I was just curious, cause it varied throughout the day. Like, sometimes you'd go through and everybody had masks on in the other areas but I can also imagine being on a treadmill and you're sucking air and, I'd take my mask off, honestly, but,
And you are not supposed to,
right,
under
right.
the county mask mandate.
Yeah, it doesn't matter if you're vaccinated or not vaccinated,
But if we ask somebody to
Right.
put one on, they refuse,
okay,
we're avoiding that confrontation.
right. So, okay, in general though, the rec center, it really is, so heavily used, like the rest of you. I've driven past and seen the parking lot with a lot of cars. My husband went for swimming at like, what time does it open, 5:30?
5.
5, okay, well, he was probably there at 4:45. But he said, right when he got there, there were already 4 swimmers do it in the lap lanes at that time. And there were people doing yoga, and there were people already on the weight equipment, and there were already people in the gymnasium. Just really, the facility is getting used. Question for you, tried to do the 5K run around the park and I kinda got lost. Do we have, are there any plans for any wayfinding signs
There is.
eventually? Okay. Cause I tried to make the correct turns to make it into the 5K and I got to like 2.7 miles instead of 3.1.
Yeah, we've talked about that.
Okay, cool. Let's see, You guys already answered those questions. Please share with Christian when he gets back. Thank you very much for the chai on the curry, 'cause I love it. He bought some. Youth Advisory Commission on the 14th, they are on the schedule to come and do a presentation to us, give a presentation to us. And I will throw out there for consideration, they'd like to get one extra thing into the budget. And since we're gonna be adopting it then, this is your first notice that they would like to do a modest carnival. Like a carnival, like similar to the ones that are done at the Larimer County Fairgrounds, at the ranch, or at the Boulder County Fairgrounds on a smaller scale. So not just, you know, elementary school carnival stuff, but actual vendor. And so the kids are looking into how much, you know, a modest level little carnival would be at Wagoner Farm Park for some point next summer. And they would like the town's support for a teen activity. So just, you know, just keep it in mind, it'll be coming before us on the 14th. And that's it, thank you.
Alright. I could not make tree committee, I know Lynn's a new member, unfortunately I had to work, so I know they are looking into a new nursery on, what do you?
No, he's sitting back there like,
Oh.
talk to the microphone.
Next to Roberts Lake, so, but I'll be at this next meeting, so I appreciate it. Chris's eval will be going out Monday, so look out for that. I gotta talk to Deputy Clerk here about getting IT ready for that, so it'll go into all your guys' inboxes. Yeah, I had a pretty bad experience the morning of the ribbon cutting because of both of you guys' speeches. I'd say otherwise though, it was great to see it. I'm glad it's finally done, you know. It will bring a lot of good to the community. I hope that morning was supposed to be something about unity. It turned into a total division thing, and I think that was really inappropriate. So I am glad it's done. I do think it'll be good for, I think we all, obviously, it'll be good for the community. And I hope we can move on past that. Great. And that is it. So I'm gonna adjourn the meeting. Have a good night and a good Thanksgiving.
Yeah, happy Thanksgiving.